Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, The Devil Fruit Avatar, by Camdog 2. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. New world, same problems. All for One grinned triumphantly as he finally adjusted to his new host body of one Tamura Shigaraki and sat ready to finish off Mirio Togata, the ninth wielder of One For All. That quirk has been a thorn in his side since the day he accidentally created it, but now it was time to reclaim it once and for all. And the best part was that the fool Togata was going to bring it straight to him. After all, the brat was just like his mentor All Might and knew that the boy would insist on a one-on-one final showdown battle instead of dragging the war out any further. Using Kurogiri, no doubt. He laughed in amusement, finding it funny that the heroes managed to break through the mental shell that he had put on the corpse of Oboro Shryakumo and man to bring the little brat back to the surface. His informants had all been caught, but not before informing him of their plan to warp Mirio past all of his forces and straight into his throne room. It also didn't hurt that he let slip that he was planning to unleash hordes of Nomu on the populace the very next day, forcing them to rush the operation. The hordes didn't exist, of course. Dr. Garaki being captured put an end to Nomu creation, and All For One has unfortunately been unable to break him free yet. But that will change once this little farce ends. All For Once cackled before spreading his arms wide. So come now, heroes, let's put an end to this once and for all. He challenged, his grin already victorious. If you insist. Before he could even ponder, the sudden response of force the likes of which not even All Might could generate slammed into him, hurtling him through the walls of his current base and into the sky. He tried to straighten himself, but he felt something clamp onto his leg before whirling him around and throwing him towards the ground, only for him to catch himself with his levitation quirk before he could hit the ground. Breathing heavily with the sound of alarms blaring below, he growled angrily as search identified the one responsible, and he glared venomously. Izuku Midoriya. He spat the name out like it was a curse and received a chuckle. So you know me. I'm honored. They laughed as a figure shimmered into existence. He was a tall, lean, muscular young man with emerald eyes and emerald hair that was long and unkempt, with the beginnings of a beard starting to show. He wore a black shirt under an emerald green trench coat, black combat pants and black boots. This was Izuku Midoriya, hero named Mao, and the teen was currently smirking towards the ancient villain who was glaring daggers at him. Oh yes, I know you. The little brat who's made my operations lately much more difficult. All For One muttered lowly, with Izuku's smirk widening. From the USJ to raid on the Shai Hasaikai, anything the League of Villains had a hand in these days Izuku Midoriya seemed to involve himself in. Well, I try to stay active. Izuku replied, his smirk growing and giving a shrug, further enraging All For One. Is that what you call killing Gigantomachia? All For One hissed with loathing. Izuku's face became serious. The big guy was gonna trample through multiple cities and kill countless citizens and heroes. Izuku stated before narrowing his eyes. And I wasn't going to allow that. All For One clicked his tongue in response. Then I'm guessing you're here to do the same to me? He questioned, with Izuku smirking once more as he nodded. That's the plan. I mean, Mirio was going to do it, but he had like 2 other things to do today, so I told him I'd handle this one for him. Izuku informed the villain, who just scowled darkly towards the teen before glancing down and seeing his forces were beginning to rally. Well, how exactly do you plan on how to deal with them at the same time as me? The villain questioned, with Izuku snapping his fingers as dozens of scrolls appeared floating in the air. Unrolling as they fell, All For One couldn't see what was on them as they fell. Down below, the long-range quirk users were about to start firing at Izuku when they noticed the scrolls falling. Unsure what to do, they moved away from them and watched them land. The second the scrolls landed, each burst into smoke, and the villains widened in horror when they saw multiple men standing over 10 foot where each scroll used to be, which each one carrying some kind of weapon. Some of the villains tried to run while others fought. Those that ran were quickly shot down by the gunmen, while those that went to fight were overwhelmed by the giant's superior strength. When one did manage to get a lucky swing and slice off an arm. However, once this happened, an explosion engulfed them, and when the smoke cleared, the man was charred on the ground while the man's arm was reattaching itself to the man's body already. Seeing this, the remaining villains fled, with the men quickly overwhelming them, now using a variety of powers. Some turning their arms into blades and guns, others shooting beams of light off of their fingertips, and some slashing enemies apart with strings. All for One could only stare in horror as his army was being decimated, which Izuku gave a laugh to. Yup, my golems are pretty strong. Only got stronger when I learned to infuse them with devil fruit powers. Izuku informed before glancing towards the quirk and now body thief. Now then, why don't you just lay down and I'll make this quick? Izuku offered, lightning pouring off his arm. This only enraged All for One. You little SHT. Do you really think after all I've done, all the progress I've made, I would simply roll over and die? He demanded, shooting an enhanced air cannon towards the teen, only for him to warp straight in front of him. I'll take that as a no then. The green-haired teen muttered before delivering a brutal uppercut that had the lightning tearing away the skin on the king of the underworld's new chest, as well blowing it off his skull. Screaming in agony, All for One flew backwards as his hyper-regeneration kicked in, causing Izuku to tisk in annoyance. That's gonna be a real pain in the butt, but let's see how far it can be pushed. Izuku challenged before shooting forward towards the ancient villain, who moved his hand forward before his fingers morphed into giant, monstrous mouths that shot forward to consume the teen. Izuku punched forward in response, firing off a tremor punch with the shockwaves. Tearing through the mouths, then his hand, and finally ripping his arm apart. Izuku didn't give the villain a second to respond as Izuku warped in front of the villain and landed a light speed kick right to the villain's head, causing him to spaz and convulse while hurtling towards the ground. All for One saw this as an opportunity and planned to use decay once he landed to start another wave of destruction that would hopefully hit the brat. Izuku dashed those plans, however, once again warping in front of the ancient villain. Izuku landed a punch powered by the strong fruit straight on All for One's torso. The ancient villain could feel his bones turn to powder and know it was only thanks to his multiple longevity quirks that he was able to survive while hyper-regeneration did its job. The punch was also sent the villain back into the air, allowing Izuku time for his next move. Placing his hand on the ground, he smirked. Scrapyard. He thought as the entire area began to turn into all manner of discarded metals. This was the basic ability of the awakened metal fruit. Izuku then used the power of the magnet fruit to fuse some of the metal together to form close to a dozen rail guns, which would be operated by the golems. With his preparations complete, Izuku looked up to see All for One's arm bulge as metal spikes, multiple arms, and rivets to grow over All for One's arm. Just like in Kamino. Izuku thought before grinning. In that case. He thought as his appearance began to change. This was the metal fruit's chainmail ability, and the metal soon started to become more jagged, rougher, and resistant. Izuku shot forward, ready to meet All for One's giant arm with his own. The two threw their punches at each other, with the two fists colliding, resulting in a standoff similar to the one All for One had with All Might those many months ago in Kamino. Bam bam slice! All for One gasped in pain as three of the golems warped in behind me, with two shooting the villain with guns while the third sliced him with a sword. All for One barely had the time to glower at the three before they disappeared again. However, by doing so, the ancient villain gave Izuku the time to reel back for another punch, this time aided by the strength fruit and landing directly on the villain's back, sending him once more back to the ground. Unfortunately for All for One, the rail guns took aim and fired, hitting the ancient villain with lasers from all around as he descended to the ground. As he fell, Izuku smirked as he retuned to normal right as his left hand glowed red and his right hand glowed blue. A sign. He declared, with red lightning impacting All for One with an N appearing on his forehead, while the blue lightning rolled over the sea of metal with the exceptions of the rail guns. The ground started to shake as the gunfire finally died down just in time for the first of the steel beams to slam into him. Something's wrong. The body snatcher thought, trying and failing to get rid of the incoming metal projectiles. They're much heavier than they should be, not to mention hotter. He thought as he grit his teeth from the burns he was receiving, which only grew worse when the dozens of swords slipped through the beams to impale him while the guns shot him. Smirking, Izuku placed his middle and thumb together. Boom! He said as he snapped his fingers and every piece of metal instantly detonated in a fiery explosion. This was due to the Boom Boom fruit powered up by the More fruit and the Tuning fruit. Izuku's eyes narrowed as his haki informed him that the man was still alive. Persistent BSTRD. He muttered, annoyed, before noticing various news coppers flying around. Well, at least they know to stay out of the danger zone. He muttered before dropping down slightly in the air to avoid a massive blast of lightning. All for One followed up by sending multiple crescent-shaped razor blades towards Izuku, who quickly destroyed them with a fire fist. Warping behind him, Izuku sent another enhanced punch to All for One, who dodged and unleashed a nuclear-sized explosion at point-blank range. The blast had no effect thanks to the bomb fruit, and All for One was once again blasted in the back thanks to the rail guns. All for One went for another combination, attacking with air cannon, radio waves, his 4 kinetic booster quirks and his 3 strength enhancer quirks. To those watching the broadcast, it reminded them of the blast from Kamino and what Shigaraki could do during the First War. However, Izuku simply responded with a tremor punch that cleaved right through the blast and impacted the villain. However, Izuku noticed that his regeneration was much slower this time, and it caused him to grin. Finally, he's starting to reach his limit. Izuku thought with a victorious smile. Giving the signal, the rail guns started their bombardment again, with Izuku adding in bursts of magma. All for One was looking worse by the second, however he wasn't down just yet. Combining his massive explosion quirk with radio waves, black lightning and his boosters and enhancers, All for One was able to create an explosion that annihilated the entire surrounding area and the scrapyard. The resulting explosion and his injuries have left him exhausted and wounded, and Izuku saw his chance. Creating a tremor sphere around his fist, Izuku then also added the power of the glint fruit to his arm to increase its speed and destructive power. From there he embedded his fist with the armament haki's hardening, emission and internal destruction, while also adding the Conqueror's haki's pressure and infusion, before finally using the power of the More fruit to further increase his speed. With his preparations done, Izuku charged forward, it taking a little over a second for Izuku to reach the villain. In that second, however, future sight came to life. It showed Izuku obliterating All for One's body, only for Izuku to disappear the moment after it happened. Smirking, Izuku didn't hesitate as he reeled his fist back. Atlas Retribution. Izuku declared, his fist slamming into the villain, whose body was completely obliterated. A second later, Izuku left a tug on his back but didn't fight it. Confident he could deal with wherever he was being sent. Line break, it was cold. That was the first thing Izuku noticed when he looked around and saw that he was inside a glacier. Before he could escape, he sensed several presences, and his observation haki let him know exactly what they were saying. Are you sure this is him? Prince Zuko. He doesn't look like an airbender, nor does his clothing look normal. An older-sounding voice questioned, getting a scoff from a younger one. Of course I am, uncle. Everyone on the boat can feel the power radiating off him. Who else but the Avatar can generate something like that? They questioned, getting a hum from the older man. Power. Izuku thought before his eyes drifted over to his arm that was still radiating haki. Oh right. Izuku thought, stopping the flow of haki, only to notice the signatures on the boat started to panic. Did you see that? His eyes moved. He's awake in there. How did he survive? The young voice from before rang out above the panicked masses. Enough. Just because he can move his eyes doesn't mean he can escape. Now cut him out and move the ice to the freezer. We don't need the Avatar thawing out. Zuko ordered, with Izuku frowning. Well, that didn't sound pleasant, and it was clear these guys weren't his allies. And while he didn't know what an Avatar is, it was clear these guys were mistaking him for them. So with that in mind, Izuku decided to show them exactly who they were messing with. Letting out a blast of Conqueror's Haki, he used the pressure technique to shatter the ice he was trapped in while knocking nearly all the occupants on the ship unconscious, with the only two still standing being an old man who was on his knees and breathing heavily and a young man with a scare over his left side who was shaking horribly and gritting his teeth, holding a bit of fire in one hand and using it to pierce the other. He used pain to keep himself awake. Izuku thought, a little impressed as he boarded the ship. Zuko managed to get to his feet and get into a fighting stance. "So we finally meet Avatar," Zuko said, watching his opponent, and grew frustrated when the older teen simply crossed his arms. "And you are?" he questioned, with Zuko scowling but answering. "Prince Zuko, banished from the Fire Nation by my father, but once I bring him you I'll be welcomed back with open arms," he said, and Izuku internally groaned. A scarred fire-using teen with daddy issues. What are the chances? He thought before taking a fighting stance and covering his fists with lightning like boxing gloves. The old man, seeing this, widened his eyes in shock and worry. "Prince Zuko, be careful. Lightning bending is an MSTR's form of fire bending. That young man is no amateur." The old man tried to warn, only for the teen to scowl at him. "Of course he's no amateur, uncle. He knocked out our men without even moving," Zuko shouted back before looking back at the green-haired teen who was waiting patiently. "But I've been waiting 3 years for this moment, and not that it's here I won't let him slip away," Zuko declared, charging forward to deliver a punch, only for Izuku to block with one hand and deliver 3 quick punches to the teen's head. One to the unmarked eye, one to the nose and one to the lip. The force of the impact plus lightning caused Zuko to drop to the ground unconscious. The old man sighed as he rubbed the bridge of his nose. "That actually went better than I expected," he thought before noticing the green-haired teen approach him. Or that's what he thought at first. Instead, he walked straight up to the table where he was going to enjoy a nice roasted duck and picked it up and began to munch on it as he tuned and walked away. The old man couldn't help but chuckle. "Pretty good, isn't it?" he asked, getting Izuku to stop and turn his head and giving a nod. "Yup, normally I don't steal food, but considering you were trying to capture me I figure it's justified," Izuku reasoned, getting a laugh from the old man. "Perfectly so," the old man agreed. "Oh, before you go, could you tell me your name? My nephew will be wanting to know the name of the one he's about to chase," he requested, getting a snort from the teen. "It's Izuku Midoriya, and you, old man?" he asked, with the old man giving a small bow. "I am Iroh," he introduced, with Izuku nodding as he took another bite of the duck. "Well then, Iroh, guess I'll see you around. Try and keep your nephew out of trouble," Izuku said before using the float fruit to take to the air and fly towards where he sensed other life signatures. As Izuku flew off, he missed the troubled look that crossed Iron's face. Lightning bending and now flight, an advanced sigh of air bending, and finally that overwhelming power he unleashed to knock everyone out and free himself from the ice. He thought while stroking his beard, deeply troubled. Hearing groans coming from his nephew as he went to check on his nephew, knowing he wasn't going to like what Iroh was about to tell him. "Line break, we shouldn't be here." These words came from Katara, daughter of the village leader and sole water bender of the Southern Water Tribe. The reason she muttered this was because she was standing in front of a marooned Fire Nation ship encased in ice. A bad omen and reminder of what the war had taken from them. "Come on, Katara, where's your sense of adventure?" The reason for her being there in the first place asked. This was Aang, an air nomad she and her brother Sokka rescued from the ice. Up until now she thought Aang was great, entertaining the kids, telling a few good stories, and even introduced her to penguin sledding. But this was definitely not something she was comfortable with. "Look, Aang, no one's allowed to enter the ship, we shouldn't even be near it," Katara informed the nomad, who didn't even slow down. To become a MSTR at bending, one must throw away their fears, he told the water bender, who felt her defiance fading away. To be a MSTR at water bending is all she ever wanted, especially since her mother died. Unfortunately, she never had anyone to teach her or any way to find a teacher. But maybe Aang could give her that chance. He was a very skilled bender, so he had to know what he was talking about. Fine. She relented as she slowly followed after him. But we have to be careful where we step and what we do, we don't know how many traps are still active. Katara tried to warn only for Aang to wave it off. Yeah, sure, I'm all about safety. Aang muttered offhandedly as he and Katara entered the ship. However, the deeper they went, the worse Katara started to feel. With every footstep it seemed to echo the pain and anguish that the Fire Nation has brought to the world. It got to the point where she had to cover her ears to block out the pained cries. That's enough. Katara yelled, stopping in place as Aang turned around confused. What's wrong? He asked with Katara breathing heavily and glaring. This was a mistake. Coming here is forbidden and it brings back bad memories of what the war has cost the world. Katara said with Aang tilting his head. Again with this war thing. Are you sure there is actually one going on? Aang questioned with Katara gritting her teeth. Of course I'm sure. It cost my mother her life. The water bender shouted, causing the air bender to jump back. What? He asked with Katara gripping her hand so hard it began to bleed. Didn't you wonder why I was the only water bender left in the village? Katara asked with Aang nervously shaking his head no. Raids from the Fire Nation that resulted in our tribe being decimated. Our people being killed and all of our water benders being slaughtered like elephant pigs. Katara said with tears streaming down her face. I watched my own mother being killed for Spurt's sake. She said with Aang taking a nervous gulp. Well, couldn't that have been just pirates? Aang tried to reason with Katara getting angrier by the minute. Oh, is that what you think? Then why hasn't my father or the rest of the men come back from fighting to their families yet? She hissed and her glare increased when Aang smiled brightly. Well, in the monastery I grew up in we were taught family ties only hold you back. So maybe they learned about that and took it to heart and decided to travel. Heck, it's possible you might have a little sibling running around in the world somewhere. Slap the slap, and Aang's pained cry echoed throughout the ship before Katara turned and left without a word, her face blank, but Aang knew better to think she had calmed down. Sighing and rubbing his cheek, the air bender decided to explore the ship more and let Katara cool down a little. Eventually he made it to the command center of the ship only to step on a wire. Activity immediately started happening all around with the door closing behind him, locking him in the room. Oh. He muttered just in time to see a flare get launched into the sky. Acting quickly, Aang used the hole in the ceiling to escape and quickly jumped down the ship. What did you do? Only to come face to face with an enraged Katara, with Aang only grinning and giving a shrug. It was an accident, he said with his best winning smile. Katara only scowled and stormed off to the village with Aang sheepishly following her. Unknown to them, they were being watched by Zuko and Iroh. Another air bender, and this time one who looks the part. Perhaps a traveling companion, Iroh said while scratching his beard. It doesn't matter who he is. All that matters is that they can lead us to the Avatar. Zuko muttered with Iroh sighing. Prince Zuko, please reconsider. If what we have seen so far, the Avatar is already a MSTR of fire and air. Perhaps water and earth as well. Along with that weird power from before, and we have a fully realized Avatar. You're not ready to face that, Iroh warned with Zuko shaking as he remembered how helpless he was. It didn't help that Zuko now had a black eye, busted nose, and swollen lip. It doesn't matter. To restore my honor I will defy the odds and do the impossible, the banished prince declared before walking away, leaving Iroh alone to sigh and shake his head at his nephew's impatience. Line break. Izuku stopped in the air as he watched the flare fly through the air. In the distance he could feel people's fear and panic through his haki. Frowning, he doubled his speed, especially so when he felt a familiar presence quickly approaching. Line break. Sokka was waiting for them at the entrance of their village along with the rest of the tribe. What happened? He demanded as soon as they came into view with Katara storming past him. Ask him. Katara said, pointing over her shoulder towards a sheepish look Aang with the mothers of the children he befriended pulling them away suspiciously. "What's got you so sad all of a sudden?" Sokka asked with Katara glaring at Aang. "Well, first he talked me into going into that Fire Nation ship. Please save your outrage for the end," she said quickly, seeing Sokka already opening his mouth. "Well, after I expressed my longing to leave, I brought up my feelings about the war." It was here that Aang said he doubted the war was really happening despite all the pain we've been suffering. When I asked why none of our loved ones have come home yet, he with an honest desperate smile on his face said that he believes families hold you back and that Dad and the others might have decided to travel the world, before suggesting we might have a sibling somewhere in the world. By then all but the youngest of the children were glaring at the young airbender who could only scratch the back of his head sheepishly. At that point I had enough and decided to leave, but not before slapping him. The woman nodded in approval. A second after I leave the ship a flare goes flying into the sky. Katara finished her tale. Katara's grandmother Kanna sighed and shook her head. She would scold her granddaughter later about going on to the ship when she clearly knows better, but for now she had to take care of the more pressing matter. Though by the looks of it Sokka seems to be taking care of it. She thought as she nodded in approval as she saw her grandson approach the airbender. Aang, seeing the older sibling approaching, smiled nervously, but before he could even open his mouth Sokka started talking. "Leave," he ordered shortly, causing Aang to frown sadly, but Sokka didn't have any sympathy. "You've caused a lot of trouble, so please take your bison and leave," Sokka told the airbender as he gestured to Aang's supposed flying bison Appa. Aang looked down dejectedly and slowly turned, but before he could fully go Katara gasped. "Sokka!" she cried, and Aang grinned as hope bloomed in his heart. "Don't even try it, Katara. I thought you were just as sad at him as I am," Sokka demanded as Katara shook her head and pointed behind him. "It's not that, look," she shouted, and Sokka turned and his eyes widened in shock and horror as a massive Fire Nation ship docked at the edge of their village. The mothers quickly moved to get their children to safety while Katara, Aang, and Sokka watched as the ramp slowly lowered. "Nice going, dumbass," Katara hissed to Aang, who looked down in guilt. It was then Zuko and a squad of Fire Nation soldiers descended. However, Aang couldn't help but snicker once he caught sight on Zuko's face. The banished prince felt a pang of annoyance, but it turned to satisfaction when Katara stomped on the airbender's foot hard and hissed at him to be quiet. "I'll make this quick," Zuko told the tribe before pointing towards Aang. "You tell me where the Avatar is," he demanded, causing those remaining to look at him confused and Aang to be hit by both panic and confusion. I can't," Aang stammered, only annoying him further. "Don't bother lying. I faced him less than an hour ago. He's the one who did this to me," Zuko admitted with everyone's eyes widening. "Wait. How do you know that whoever it was you fought was the Avatar?" Sokka questioned, with Zuko becoming more impatient. "Yeah, and why do you think Aang of all people could lead you to him? He claimed he didn't know him," Katara said, but shot a suspicious look towards Aang, who looked away in guilt. "A fair question, young ones," Iroh said before Zuko could say anything. But the young man Zuko faced was able to use both lightning bending, MSTR level fire bending technique, and then flight, a MSTR level air bending technique. Iroh answered, and the tribe started muttering to each other quietly but excitedly. "But that's not possible," Aang thought in disbelief at what he just heard as Iroh continued. "As for the air bender leading us to him, we figured he was the Avatar's companion and air bending instructor." "The Avatar?" Katara whispered, her eyes sparkling to life and a smile graced her lips as hope started to bloom in her heart. Sokka, however, frowned. "He's not here, and I doubt this guy can lead you to him, considering we fished him out of an iceberg a few hours ago," Sokka told them as he pointed over to Aang. "What a coincidence we found the Avatar in an iceberg as well," Zuko informed before taking a step forward. Now hand over the monk or he'll dash. Zuko started to threaten only for a massively strong wind to pick up. Those from the Fire Nation tried to fight against it but were helpless and launched back on their ship. I'm sorry, you'll what exactly? Izuku said as he floated in the air before landing, getting star-struck looks from the water tribe. Zuko groaned as he got to his feet before his eyes winded as he saw his target. This lit a fire in him as he quickly approached the team. Surrender, Avatar, or I'll have my men destroy this village. Zuko threatened before a loud crashing sound could be heard as massive tendrils wrapped themselves around the ship. This was thanks to the ocean fruit, a Logia devil fruit that lets Izuku become, conquer and manipulate water, and the very fruit Ima used to conquer the world. Katara was in complete awe. He used water bending without moving a muscle. She thought with Aang staring in disbelief. Zuko also watched in alarm as his ship was slowly crushed before the tendrils stopped. Now then, Zuko, how about this? We have a match, you win I come with you, but if I win you leave this place in peace. Izuku suggested, with Zuko breathing deeply through his nose and then charging forward before launching a massive fireball towards the green-haired team. However, Zuko's eyes widened in horror as Izuku absorbed the fire before disappearing from view. A slight crunch in the snow was Zuko's only warning, causing him to turn right as Izuku smashed his fist, now a war hammer thanks to the arms fruit, and slugged the prince right into the head, causing him to slam into the ground. Izuku raised his foot to stomp on Zuko, but the prince managed to jump back at the last second and tried to get some distance, only for Izuku to stretch and twist his arm back and laughing as he slammed Zuko with a gum rifle, sending him flying into the ship. He's incredible. Katara gushed, with Sokka nodding but looked on in confusion. But what's with those weird moves he's using? Sokka couldn't help but question before shrugging. Oh well, guess avatars are like that. He muttered. He's not the Avatar. Aang shouted suddenly, causing everyone to turn to him. Oh really? Then how do you explain what he's doing? Katara questioned skeptically. I don't know how, but I do know he's not the Avatar. Aang said with certainty in his voice. And how do you know that? Kanna asked, with Aang releasing a sigh. Because I am the Avatar. Aang said, only to get snorts from the others. Sure you are, buddy. Sokka said, rolling his eyes before turning back to the action, and just in time to see its end. Izuku approached the downed prince and with a single movement threw him up onto the ship. Now then, I think I win, so why don't you be a man and leave? Izuku said before gripping the ship. On second thought, why don't I help you leave? Izuku offered, and before everyone's eyes Izuku picked up the ship like it was nothing. This cannot end well. Iroh said nervously, and he was right to be, as with a single toss Izuku sent the ship hurtling through the air, causing those on board to scream in horror. Seeing the threat gone, Izuku wiped his hands tougher before he noticed the cheering. That was awesome. Sokka said, running up to him with Katara right behind him. You're incredible. The waterbender praised, getting Izuku chuckle sheepishly. A little bit away Kanna was cheering as well. The Avatar has returned. She exclaimed, something that was echoed by the rest of the tribe. Something that greatly upset Aang. But I keep telling you I'm the Avatar. He said, only getting a scoff. Please, we all saw him use water and air, and he could use fire from what that old man said. Sokka reminded him with Katara nodding. And just how many elements can you bend? Katara questioned with Aang looking away. Just air. He admitted with Katara nodding. That's what I thought. Just give it up already before you make the Avatar mad. Katara said, but before anything else could be said Izuku spoke up. Hate to interrupt. He said before he continued once he saw he had everyone's attention as he continued sheepishly. Sorry to ruin everyone's good mood, but I think there's been a bit of a mix-up. Line break. This is amazing. Katara whispered in awe as she saw Kanna and Aang were marveling over Izuku's cell phone. It became very clear very quickly to Izuku that he wasn't on his planet anymore after asking them some simple questions. So once they were situated in the Water Tribe family's home, Izuku began to explain his world. To say everyone was amazed was an understatement. A world where over 80% of the world had a unique ability was amazing. Cities that had buildings that reached the sky. Giant metal tubes that allowed people to sail through the air, and tiny boxes that can give you any information you wanted. Izuku of course also went into great detail of heroes and villains, and while they were marveling about the heroes they were great troubled by the villains. Izuku covered everything that happened to him right up until the fight with All For One, and while the Water Tribe members were in awe, Aang was glaring at Izuku. Was killing him really necessary? The Airbender questioned. You could have just sent him to prison. He could have realized what he was doing was wrong and repented for his crimes. But you stole the chance away from him. He accused only to be met with flat looks from Kanna and Sokka, while Katara looked annoyed and Izuku quirked an eyebrow. So you missed the point about his body being superhuman and the countless lives he ruined for power. Do you really believe a guy like that would have repented, or that the people of my world wouldn't have tried something if he were to be looked away? Izuku questioned, with Aang looking more frustrated. Well, you don't seem like you're that upset about taking a life. I bet it's not the first time it's happened either. Aang declared, with Izuku shrugging. You're right, of course. My country was going through a war and I wasn't going to let criminals do as they please at the expense of the innocent. Hearing this, Aang narrowed his eyes. So you're saying you enjoyed killing? He asked, only to be knocked back by Izuku's killing intent. Watch yourself, boy. Izuku warned before he calmed down. And for the record, no, I didn't, not for a second. Izuku promised before smirking. Well, expect for one. He admitted. But this person did kill a small child over and over again to harvest her genetic material to try and end the age of quirks. So yeah, felt pretty good about that one. Izuku said, and the Water Tribe members looked horrified at what the monster did to an innocent child, while Aang looked like he was going to be sick. Still he persisted as he moved on. There's still no reason to kill that's ever justified. The Airbender declared, with Sokka quirking an eyebrow. Not even to defend your home. Because that's why Dad and the rest of the men have gone to fight in the war. Are you saying they should just knock out their enemy while give them the chance for revenge later? He asked, with Aang not sure how to answer that. Kanna decided to take pity on the monk as she handed Izuku back his phone. Well, now that you've told us about your world, it's only right we tell you about ours, the elder said as Izuku listened with rapt attention. It was then he learned about the world. The four nations, bending, the world and its connection to the Sprit world. They talked about the war that had been going on for 100 years and how the Fire Nation has been relentless in their ploy to conquer the world and how they've been steadily making progress. And finally they told Izuku of the Avatar, the bridge between the worlds and the only one who can bend all four elements. How the previous Avatar vanished a little before the war started and hasn't been seen since. Here everyone looked skeptically at Aang, who looked guilty. I'm sorry. Was all he could mutter, with Izuku sighing. Frankly, the Avatar thing sounded like a bad idea from the start. Honestly, one person dealing with pretty much all the world's problems sounded doomed to fail. But there were more pressing issues to deal with, namely the war, so without any more waiting Izuku quickly stood. Wait, where are you going, Izuku? Katara was quick to call out. Going to find the Fire Lord. Figured if I can bring him down the war ends. Izuku reasoned as he headed for the exit. The children's eyes widened at this before Sokka grinned. Oh yeah, I like the sound of that. He grinned. Sokka. How could you just stand there while Izuku plans to go out into the unknown world alone? She demanded, with Sokka giving her a flat look. Maybe because he's got powers beyond anything this world could hope to fight against. Frankly, I say, if he wants to fight against the Fire Lord, let him. He could easily take him down if what we've seen is any indication. Heck, why, any luck taking down the Fire Lord and his family could start a civil war in the Fire Nation. Sokka said excitedly, stopping Izuku in his tracks. He stood there for 5 seconds before sighing and making his way back to the table where everyone was sitting. What's wrong, Izuku? Katara asked, conceited, with Izuku gesturing to Sokka. It's what he said. Sokka is absolutely correct. If I just go and annihilate the Fire Lord, a civil war could very well erupt from the power vacuum that would come from the empty throne. Okay, but how is that a bad thing? Sokka questioned, thinking a civil war in the Fire Nation was the best thing that could possibly happen. Because it would sooner or later involve innocent men, women, and children who are just trying to live peacefully and that have done nothing to aid in the war. Izuku answered with Aang, Kanna's and Katana's eyes widening in horror at the thought while Sokka looked extremely uncomfortable at the thought. Not to mention that could sooner or later grow and involve the rest of the world and make things worse than they are already. Izuku finished getting a frightened looks from the others. Well, what should we do then? Aang questioned only to blink as everyone turned to him. Shouldn't we be asking you that? You are the Avatar after all. Katara said, rolling her eyes, still having a hard time believing it. Aang didn't know what to say, so Izuku took pity on him. Well, first up he should probably try and get himself some teachers for the other elements. He needs to MSTR earth, fire, and water right. He asked, getting nods from the others. Then he should start there and then plan accordingly. Izuku suggested. Katara grinned. Actually, that could work. If Aang needs to MSTR the 3 other elements, he needs to go to the North Pole to learn water bending. Katara explained before turning to Aang and Izuku. You'll take me with you too, right? She asked, and Aang looked taken back. You think I'm going to travel with him? Aang demanded, only to get a raised eyebrow from Katara. You mean the hero in training with powers that make the Avatar look a toddler? Yes, I do. Katara said, and Aang couldn't actually think of a counter. So he turned and glared at Izuku. You're not allowed to kill any more, got it? He demanded, only for Izuku to snort. F off, boy, if someone needs to be put down, I'm going to put them down. Izuku swore before turning to Katara. Why do you want to go with us? He questioned, with Katara grinning. To find a water-bending MSTR so I can become just like my mother. She revealed, and for a second a troubled look came across Kanna's face. Wait. Sokka shouted, jumping to his feet. You can't just run off with 2 strangers you just meet by yourself. Sokka told his sister, with Izuku raising his eyebrow. What, you don't want to come along? He questioned, freezing Sokka in his tracks. You might not be a bender, but neither will all the enemies we're bound to face. Izuku reasoned before looking him over. And with a little training I'm sure you can go against the best of them. Izuku predicted, with Sokka's eyes starting to sparkle. Kanna, seeing her grandchildren with new life entering their eyes, smiled as she stood. Well, she said as everyone turned to her. We might as well get you packed. Line break. You smell weird. Izuku smirked at the one who said this, which was none other than Appa, Angus flying bison, who he could understand thanks to the whisper fruit. Well, that'll happen when you come from another world, big guy. Izuku informed, with Appa becoming shocked. You can understand me? He questioned, getting a nod from Izuku. Loud and clear, buddy. Izuku confirmed, getting a grin from the bison as Izuku climbed on. Finally, someone he could actually have a conversation with. Aang was already on top waiting for Sokka and Katara, who were saying goodbye to their grandmother. Follow your heart and dreams, my little moonlight. Kanna told Katara, who hugged her. I will, Gran. She promised before letting go, allowing Kanna to approach Sokka. Take care of your sister. Protect your friends and be the man, your mother, father, and I know you can be. She told him, causing Sokka to smile as he hugged her. I will, Gran. With that, the siblings quickly climbed onto Appa's saddle, and with a quick yip. Appa was flying high in the air. As Katara watched her home grow smaller and smaller, she turned to Aang. So where to first? She asked, causing Aang to grin. Oh, don't you worry. I've got a ton of stops planned on our way to the dash. Aang was interrupted as Izuku loudly clapped his hands together. Aang, there's a war going on. Every second we waste more people are killed or hurt. We can't take needless stops. He reminded the airbender who frowned. Well, do you think we can still buy the Souther Air Temple? It's where I grew up and I'd love to see how it changed. Aang requested with Izuku nodding. That was perfectly reasonable request. Katara however frowned. Aang, just remember what we said, the air nomads were targeted and no one's seen them in over 100 years. I don't want to sound cruel but you should be ready for the worst. She warned with Aang looking extremely pained at the thought. Well, just because no one's seen them doesn't mean they're gone. He defended, though it sounded like he was also trying to convince himself. The other three looked at each other before Izuku shrugged. Just don't expect too much, Aang, that's all we're saying. Causing the airbender to sigh but nod, knowing they weren't doing it out of spite. Izuku meanwhile looked up at the sunset, his mind deep in thought. Well, this is just great. I end a war just to end up in another world and right in the middle of another one. He thought before glancing towards his new friends, and a small smile graced his lips. Still, it's not completely bad and there has to be some way to get home. He thought before narrowing his eyes. Besides, this world is in trouble. It's filled with pain and suffering and needs help. And I'm going to do everything in my power to protect this world. He thought before his eyes landed on Aang. No matter who gets in my way. The Avatar has returned. Izuku, Sokka and Katara sat in silence as Appa flew through the mountains that lead to the Southern Air Temple as Aang told them stories about what his time there. And there was one time where after he finished baking cakes, Monk Gyatso and I used air bending to launch them straight on to the Council of Elders' heads. Aang laughed, causing Sokka to burst out laughing, Izuku to chuckle and Katara to giggle. I can't wait for you to meet him. And like that the laughter stopped only to be replaced with an uncomfortable silence that only ended when Izuku sighed. Aang, remember what we talked about the other day? No one's heard from the airbenders in over 100 years. So please don't expect too much. Izuku warned, and although his smile became a little strained he waved it off. See, I've been thinking about that too, and the only way to get to an air temple is with a flying bison. Aang tried to reason with them. Aang. Katara sighed, not wanting the monk to try and delude himself. They're fine guys, trust me, and you'll see that soon enough. Aang promised, causing the other three to trade looks. Fine, but do you really expect this Gyatso guy to still be around? I'm not trying to be mean or cruel, but he was a part of this Council of Elders, right? That has to mean he was already pretty old. Do he had another 100 years in him? Sokka asked with Aang scratching the back of his head. Okay, that actually was a good point, Aang had to admit, and as much as Aang wanted to see his teacher again, Gyatso was already entering the years that was considered old even by air nomad standards. Alright, so Gyatso might already be gone. Aang admitted, though it pained him to admit. But still, there's going to be tons of other monks and sights to see. Aang promised, with the other three sighing in frustration, but de-iced let it rest. A few seconds later the group cleared the last mountain top and the Southern Air Temple came into view. Izuku couldn't help the impressed whistle he let out. What a sight! He muttered with Aang smiling happily. We're home, buddy. He told Appa, who roared in agreement. As they approached, however, Izuku scowled. Aang. He called. I'm not picking up any human life signs with my hockey. The green-haired teen announced, causing Katara and Sokka frown in concern. You must be doing it wrong then. Remember what I said, no bison, no getting to our temples. Aang said, causing Izuku's scowl to increase and the water tribe members to frown in annoyance. It was clear Aang wasn't going to listen to them without evidence, and unfortunately it seems they were about to stumble onto a whole treasure trove of it. Line beak. Of all the docks we had to land at, it had to be these. Zuko thought in annoyance as he and Iroh disembarked from their ship, which was tiny next to the massive war ships it was in between. I want the ship repaired and functional as soon as possible. Zuko informed his uncle, who turned and saw the ship was badly damaged. Dents from when the men slamming into it, a hole from where the avatar grabbed it and all the pieces hanging off it from the multiple times they bounced on and off the ocean. So we continue our search for the avatar. Iroh questioned with Zuko quickly turning to him. Don't mention him on these docks. The second he's discovered the entire Fire Nation will begin hunting him down and getting in my way, and that's the last thing I need. Zuko warned. Getting in the way of what exactly, Prince Zuko? A new voice questioned, causing Zuko to twitch in anger as he turned to where it came from. Commander Zhao. Zuko muttered disdainfully with his arms crossed. It's Commander now. He helpfully informed with his arms behind his back. And of course General Iroh, the hero of our nation. Zhao said with a bow as Iroh smiled politely. I'm retired now, General. Iroh reminded him with Zhao nodding. The Fire Lord's brother and son are of course welcome in my harbor. Might I ask what brings you here, however? He questioned with Iroh pointing towards their ship. We are in need of repairs to our ship. Iroh informed with Zhao raising an eyebrow. That's quite a bit of damage. Zhao pointed out with Zuko nodding. We were hit by an unexpected storm while searching near the Southern Water Tribe. Caused us to slam into a few icebergs. Zuko lied through his teeth and he was partially corrected. They certainly slammed through a few of them when the Avatar sent them flying. Zhao however narrowed his eyes but nodded, unable to find anything wrong or suspicious about the story. And how goes your search for the Avatar? He questioned, and although it was gone in an instant, Zhao did see a look of panic and anger in Zuko's eyes. Nothing so far, a few leads but ended up going nowhere. Zuko told the commander, who chuckled. What a shame. He muttered, an amused grin on his face that didn't help with Zuko's mood. Would the two of you care to join me for a drink? We're both members of the Fire Nation and it might help trading information between us. Zhao informed. I'd rather eat rusted metal. Zuko thought to himself, but before he could answer verbally, Iroh rested his hand on his nephew's shoulder. Prince Zuko and I would be honored to, Commander. Iroh accepted before he started walking away with Zhao. You wouldn't happen to have any ginseng tea, would you? It's my favorite. Iroh asked, leaving Zuko to breathe fire out in anger before reluctantly following after them. Line break. The silence was beginning to unnerve Izuku as he Sokka, and Katara followed after Aang. And there's where me and my friends used to play air ball against each other. He said, pointing to a large area where wooden beams were standing along with two goals. And that's where the bison used to sleep. He said, pointing further away before frowning. I can't believe the monks living here let it get this bad. He muttered, but his friends still heard him. Looks like he's finally starting to accept it, or at least a little. Izuku thought before sighing. So air ball, how do you play? Izuku asked, causing Aang to grin. A few minutes later Izuku and Aang were standing on two of the poles, with Aang using air bending to move the ball around while Izuku stood with his arms crossed. Any time now, feather feet. Izuku suggested, with Aang grinning before launching the ball forward, causing it to bounce off the poles and towards Izuku's goal. However, a burst of wind suddenly blew through, causing the ball to change its trajectory and fly straight through Aang's goal. And that makes Izuku 12 to Aang, Sokka muttered, watching the game with Katara. Aang was pouting at getting beat before he jumped down. Come on, there's still so much I want to show you guys. He said before running off. The other three were about to follow him when Sokka noticed something. Hey guys. He said, pointing to their left, and the other two were troubled to see a rusted Fire Nation helmet. Izuku knelt down and picked it up. So the Fire Nation was here. Izuku muttered, looking deeply troubled before sighing. We need to tell Aang. He said, getting nods from the others as they followed after the airbender. They soon caught up to him and he was staring in front of a statue of an airbender. Guys, I want to introduce you to Monk Gyatso, the greatest airbender in the world. Aang said, bowing to the statue of his teacher. So this is the guy who taught you everything about airbending? Izuku asked, with Aang looking lost in thought. Yeah. he muttered before walking into the building behind the statue. Come on, there's someone I'm ready to meet and they're waiting for me right through here. Aang said with the other three looking at each in confusion before following him. They four stopped in front of a door with what appeared to be horns acting as a lock. But Aang, no one could survive in there for 100 years. Katara tried to point out with Aang not listening. It's possible. I mean, I survived in the iceberg for 100 years. He tired to counter with Izuku raising an eyebrow. Yes, with your body being perfectly preserved. I doubt anyone here had any method to replicate that. Besides, I'm not sensing anything living in there. Izuku pointed out, wanting to reveal the Fire Nation helmet at the moment. Well, I guess you really need to work on improving your sensing ability, Izuku. Aang said, causing Izuku to glare darkly at the avatar as he used air bending to open the door. Come on guys, let's go. Aang said as he entered the chamber with the other three following slowly behind. Line break, Zuko and Iroh were in Zhao's war tent as they listened to the general speak. And by year's end the Earth Kingdom will be completely under our control and the Fire Lord will claim victory in this war. Zhao finished his explanation with Zuko scoffing. If my father thinks the entire world will follow him willing, then he's a fool. Zuko said with Zhao smirking. 2 years at sea has done little to temper your tongue. Zhao noted. So are you truly still searching for the Avatar? He died along with the rest of the airbenders 100 years ago. Zhao scoffed before noting Zuko looking away. Unless you found some evidence that says otherwise. Zhao smirked with Zuko, gripping the arms of his chair tightly. I haven't found anything. Zuko related, getting the commander to sigh. Prince Zuko, the Avatar is the only one who can stop the Fire Nation from winning this war. Zhao reminded the prince as he leaned down towards him. If you have an ounce of loyalty left, you'll tell me what you found. I haven't found anything. Zuko repeated himself, looking Zhao in the eye. It's like you said. The Avatar must have died a long time ago. Zuko said before standing up. Come on uncle, we're going. He said as he made for the exit, only for 2 of the guards to block his path as a third walked in. Commander Zhao, we just finished integrating the crew as you instructed. They confirmed that Prince Zuko had fought the Avatar on 2 separate occasions. The soldier informed, with Zuko starting to shake in anger. Now remind me. Zhao's voice was suddenly dripping with satisfaction and victory. How was your ship damaged again? Zuko knew he had no choice at this point and had to reveal everything that happened at the Southern Water Tribe. Meeting the Avatar, to the mysterious power he had and how he was powerless against him. He informed how he followed a monk and Water Tribe girl back to their home only for the Avatar to turn up and perform acts of bending that seemed monstrous without moving a muscle, as well as demonstrate abilities no bender could accomplish before lifting up their ship with a hand and sending it flying. By the end of the story, Zhao was shaking in rage. So you confirm the Avatar is not only alive, not only a MSTR of the 4 elements while bending them on levels never seen before, but has accesses to abilities never seen before as well as strength never seen before, and you didn't feel the need to report it? Zhao demanded, with Zuko glaring back. I have been hunting the Avatar for 3 years, and when I see him again I'll dash. You'll what? Zhao interrupted as he released a wave of fire towards Zuko. Fight him again when you're clearly out of your league. Zhao demanded, with Zuko growling at him. And just what do you plan on doing? Yeah. I told you he absorbed the fire like it was nothing. How do you plan to face off against that? Zuko demanded as Zhao let out a sigh. I plan to send this information to the capital and let the higher-ups figure out the best course of action. Zhao informed before glaring coldly at the banished prince. As for you, once I leave, my guards will escort you to your ship and you'll be free to go. Zhao informed, getting Zuko to glance towards Zhao. Why are you being so cautious? Afraid I could stop you from sending the information? He said, with Zhao bursting out in laughter. You stop me? He questioned, with Zuko standing up to glare at the man. Believe what you will, but I will capture the Avatar. Zuko promised while ignoring his uncle's warning. Capturing the avatar is impossible for you, just as besting me is impossible for you. Zhao mocked. I have countless solders with hundreds of ships under my command while you have a ragtag crew and a single ship and not much of one at that. Along with no home and allies, Spritz your own father doesn't even want you. Zhao said with Zuko growing more and more angry. Once I deliver the avatar to my father he will welcome me back with open arms. And restore my rightful place on the throne, Zuko told the commander who only glared coldly at him. If your father wanted you he would have let you return by now, avatar or no avatar. The commander informed the prince who started to shake. But in his eyes you're just a failure and disgrace and you even have the scar to prove it. And that was the boiling point as Zuko with a roar shot out of his chair and got face to face with Zhao. How would you like one to match? The prince threatened, getting a snort from the commander. Is that a challenge? He questioned in amusement. An Agni Kai at sunset. Zuko confirmed with Zhao nodding, very well. He accepted as both backed off. It's a shame your father won't be here to watch me humiliate you. Zhao said before leaving the tent. Once he did, Iroh spoke up. Prince Zuko, have you forgotten the last time you dueled a MSTR? Iroh asked, and Zuko's fist clenched and began to shake as he felt a phantom and familiar heat cover his scar. I will never forget. Line break. It was a hall of statues that filled the chamber the gang walked into. Okay, please tell me I'm not the only one who's getting weird out here. Sokka asked as they inspected each of the statues. How are all these people? Katara questioned while Aang looked deep in thought. I'm not sure, but it feels like I know them somehow. Aang admitted with Izuku thinking before glancing at the one in front of him. Getting an idea, he decided to test it. Aang, can you tell me the name of this man? The green-haired teen asked, pointing to the statue of a water bender in front of him. Katara looked at him in confusion as Aang walked closer to inspect the statue, and before she could ask anything Aang actually answered. That's Kuruk. Aang answered, looking confident but confused on how he knew. Izuku however nodded and moved down a little and this time pointed to a firebender. And him? He asked with Aang tilting his head for a moment before answering, Cedo. Understanding flashed through Katara's eyes and she instantly pointed towards the second to the end. What about her, Aang? She questioned as Aang ran over to get a look. That's Kyoshi. He said, and looking towards the final state, and that's Roku. He answered before his eyes widened. These are all the past avatars. He realized before turning to Izuku. How did you figure it out? He questioned with the green-haired teen shrugging. Sounded a lot like how I felt when I was first getting the memories. He said, having explained how his quirk worked to the others. Yeah, that's all well and good somehow, but how does that help you? Sokka questioned, and before the group could begin to think on that, a loud noise spooked the natives of the world into hiding. Izuku, what are you doing? Katara questioned with Izuku standing out in the open looking completely relaxed. Didn't I already tell you guys that I didn't sense any sigh of human life here? He questioned, and after a moment Sokka and Katara both hesitantly stood up. But I said you needed to train with it more, so it could be wrong here. Aang tried to argue with the other three, ignoring him. The two Water Tribe members stood a little uneasy as the shadow got bigger and bigger. But Izuku wasn't worried, especially when he started to hear whoever it was begin to mutter to them. What is wrong with me? I knew I should have been saving up food, but I didn't, and now I can only hope I find more before. What's that smell, and since when was this open? A voice squeaked as the newcomer turned out to be a lemur. Hairless monkeys. What are hairless monkeys doing in here? The lemur chirped, and before the three could react Aang jumped up with a smile on his face. Flying lemur. He cried as he immediately ran to it. Crazy hairless monkey. The lemur chirped as it took off with a laughing Aang behind him. DMN it, Aang, get back here. Izuku growled after him, followed shortly by Sokka and Katara. Soon the lemur jumped off the cliff with Aang in quick pursuit, with both landing on the ground below. Aang made lunge for the lemur only for the furry animal to roll out of the way into an abandoned hut. Come on out little guy, I won't hurt you. Aang promised as he moved the curtains aside to the next room only to freeze in horror at what he saw. Doze's Fire Nation soldiers, their armor littering the ground, littered the room as Aang viewed in terror and disbelief. Firebenders. They were here. He questioned in disbelief before his eyes went to the lone airbender in the room who was wearing a necklace he knew anywhere. It was his mentor Monk Gyatso. No. Aang muttered as he fell to his knees. He wanted to deny it. Say it was all a cruel trick, but he couldn't deny what was in front of his eyes. Gyatso. Aang muttered as tears started to fall. It was also here the words of his friend started to ring through his ears, as well as everything he had seen since coming here. His friends telling them airbenders haven't been seen in over 100 years and warning him about what they might find. Izuku warning him he didn't sense any significant life, only for Aang to brush it off without a thought, the grounds being clearly abandoned and unkept, with him just believing the current monks were neglecting their responsibilities. It was then Izuku walked in. DMN at Aang, we don't have time for dash. Izuku trailed off, seeing Aang on his knees, surrounded dozens of corpses of Fire Nation soldiers, with a lone air nomad laying in the center of the room wearing a median he had just seen on a statue. SHT, Izuku hissed under his breath as he slowly approached Aang and placed his hand on his shoulder. Come on, let's get you and him out of here. We can give him a proper air nomad burial, one that your teacher deserved. Izuku suggested gently, trying to reassure the younger boy. Only to get no response. Aang. Izuku asked, his concern growing especially when he noticed the airbender's tattoos start to glow. Back in the room of the avatar statues, Roku's eyes started to glow, quickly followed the rest of the statues. All over the world similar events were occurring. From a portrait of past avatars in the Earth Kingdom to a shrine in the North Pole. Even in the Fire Nation such an event was occurring. Send word to the Fire Lord immediately. The avatar has retuned. A fact the whole world was about to become aware of. Back at the air temple, Izuku was flying in the air to avoid the wind storm that Aang was currently generating. DMN at Aang, you need to calm down or you'll bring the whole temple down. Izuku tried to tell him only the wind to increase. DMN it, he's not listening, what do I do? Yelling at him to calm down won't do anything, and empty words of comfort won't do anything either. Izuku tired to think before a rattling sound got his attention and saw the wind was starting to affect Gyatso's corpse. Wanting to stop Aang before he did something he would regret, Izuku flew towards the avatar and grabbed hold of. Snap out of it, Aang, otherwise you'll blow away Gyatso's remains. Izuku shouted, and that seemed to get through as Aang's head snapped towards the body of his mentor. Sure enough, Gyatso's body was truly starting to rattle, and it looked like was about to be blown away any moment. Slowly, ever so slowly, the wind died down as the glow started to fade from Aang's tattoos and his eyes. Once the two reached the ground, Aang fell to his knees. I'm sorry. He muttered, with Izuku sighing as he scratched his head. Don't apologize. Your response was completely understandable. Frankly, I don't want to meet the guy who wouldn't react seeing something like that. It was at that point Sokka and Katara ran in. What happened? Are we under attack? Sokka demanded, only to notice the scene. Oh no. He muted while Katara covered her mouth in shock and fear. Aang. She cried, flashes of her mother on that dreadful day appearing in her head. She wanted to run and hug him, but Sokka stopped her when she turned to glare at him. He just shook his head. Now was not the time for that. Slowly Aang got to his feet and slowly approached his teacher before kneeling down in front of him. I'm sorry. Sorry for everything. Not taking my responsibilities as the Avatar seriously, for running away and not being there when everyone needed me. Aang said before lowering his head. And I'm sorry that I didn't get to say this to you in person. Aang apologized one last time before looking down as silence overtook the room. Maybe you can. Izuku's sudden remark caught everyone off guard as Aang whirled around to face him. What? He asked, his voice quivering, with Izuku looking at Aang with a smile. I have a way for you to say goodbye to your mentor if you would allow it. Izuku said with Aang now shaking managed a nod with Izuku walking forward until he was in front of the skeleton and said a single word. Arise. Line break. The sun had nearly set as Zuko and Zhao were kneeling on opposite sides of the arena facing away from each other. Remember your fire-bending basics, Prince Zuko. They are your greatest weapons. Iroh tried to give his nephew some last-minute advice with Zuko's eyes narrowing. I refuse to let him win. The prince declared as he stood up and faced his opponent. This will be over quickly. Zhao promised as he stood to face the younger man as a gong signified the beginning of the match. For a moment neither moved and merely eyed their opponent before Zuko slowly threw a punch as a fireball flew towards Zhao. The commander smirked as he easily dodged it along with the rest of the punches that Zuko followed up with while completely blocking the last one before smirking at a panting Zuko. Growling, Zuko launched an arch of fire with a kick that forced Zhao to block. With fire before launching a blast of fire from his foot with Zaho clapping his hands together and then sending his own blast of fire, cancelling out Zuko's. Basics, Prince Zuko, break his groove. Iroh tired to advise only for Zuko to be forced on the defensive as Zhao launched blast of fire one after another. This went on until Zuko fell to the ground and Zhao seized the opportunity to finish it by jumping into the air to unleash a stronger blast of fire. Zuko's eyes widened in panic, however once Zhao got close enough Zuko twisted his body in a single move, got onto his feet and faced Zhao to stumble. And that was all Zuko needed as he unleashed a barrage of fire from his punches and kicks, forcing Zhao further and further back until one final kick forced Zhao to the ground and at Zuko's mercy. Now Zhao was a lot of things, but a coward was not one of them, and he didn't even blink as Zuko stood above him, his fist raised and ready to strike. Do it. The commander shouted as Zuko launched a ball of fire mere inches from Zhao's head. Pathetic. Zhao muttered, his eyes full of disgust. Your father raised a coward. He informed with Zuko scoffing. Next time you get in my way, I promise I'll finish the job. Zuko swore before turning and walking away. Zhao stood for a moment, the temptation to strike the prince's back almost too alluring to pass up. However, that would make him an even bigger coward than the boy, and he wouldn't allow that. So with a scoff he stood and walked away, leaving Iroh to glance towards the man before smiling as he approached his nephew. That was well done, Prince Zuko, you've truly proven yourself today. Iroh praised with Zuko smiling. Thank you, uncle. Was all he could say as the pair headed back for their ship, with Zuko's resolve to capture the Avatar more intense than ever. Line break. It was a sight that left Aang, Katara, and Sokka in disbelief as a specter with purple skin and black robes emerged from Gyasto's corpse. This was a shadow sauter called forth with the power of the human fruit, model, Ashborn, the true name of the shadow fruit. Gyatso. Aang whispered, his voice cracking as the shadow smiled kindly down at him. He then made to move towards Izuku, only for the green-haired teen to raise his hand. I only summoned you so Aang could say goodbye. Once that's done I'll send you back to the afterlife. Izuku informed, getting a nod from the monk. Well, give you guys so privacy. Sokka said as he, Katana and Izuku left the room, leaving the two alone. Once outside, Sokka sat down with a sigh. Man, that was heavy. He muttered before turning to Izuku, so you can raise the dead as well. What can't you do? He asked, getting a small smile from Izuku. Katara was silent for a moment before turning to Izuku. Hey Izuku, how exactly do you bring someone back? She asked while ignoring her brother's warning look, having an idea what she wanted to know. As long as I have a bit of DNA I can revive them. Doesn't matter what it is. Izuku informed, with Katara looking away in thought. I see. She muttered, fiddling with her necklace for a moment while Sokka looked at his sister in concern. Back with the airbenders, Aang slowly approached the older monk. Gyatso he tried to say, only for Gyatso to smile. I am happy to see you're alright, Aang. The Shteo said, and that took away everything Aang had, and before he knew it he was rushing forward and hugging the shadow, tears once more rushing down his face. Gyatso laughed as he wrapped his arms around the boy. I have missed you as well, Aang. He said, hugging his student tightly until Aang finally let go as Gyatso frowned. But I must also apologize to you as well. The shadow informed, confusing, apologize. But I was the one who ran away, and it was the elders who planned to separate us. Aang tried to remind him with Gyatso nodding. And that only happened because I didn't take your training seriously. We revealed that you were the Avatar early because we expected something was about to happen and wanted you as ready as possible. Yet despite knowing this, I still decided to treat you just the same when I should have altered your training in a way that would let you still enjoy your youth while appeasing the council. Gyatso told the Avatar, who looked down. But I should have been here. I couldn't have helped and maybe gotten some airbenders to safety. Aang tried to say with Gyatso nodding. Yes, that could have happened. You could have also been killed with the rest of us, causing the world to lose air bending forever and forever, crippling the Avatar and destroying the balance. I know it might be hard to accept, Aang, but you running away might have saved the world. Gyatso tired to ease the guilt off his student's shoulders. But what do I do now? Aang questioned with Gyatso smiling. Do as you've done countless times before and will do countless times in the future. MSTR the four elements and bring balance to the world. And it seems you won't be alone to do it. Gyatso remarked with Aang smiling at the mention of his friends. Gyatso, I think I'm ready to say goodbye. Aang said with Gyatso nodding in agreement. So without any further hesitation, Aang called the others in. Everything said that needs to be said? Izuku asked with Gyatso nodding. Of course, my king. Thank you for giving Aang and I this gift. The shadow said with Izuku nodding and raising his hand. Gyatso's body started to glow as he and Aang shared one last look and smile before the shadow departed, leaving the four standing there alone. You okay, Aang? Izuku asked after a moment of silence with Aang nodding and rubbing his eyes. Yeah, thank you for that, Izuku. Aang said with Izuku nodding. Right now, what do you want to do with his remains? The green-haired teen asked with Aang letting out a sigh. If it's alright with you guys, I'd rather handle this alone. Air nomad tradition, it won't take long, Aang said with the three nodding in understanding. As Aang left, Izuku felt a familiar presence quickly approach and land on his shoulder. Hey there, little guy. Izuku said as he gently petted the lemur on his head. Yeah, hi, so is Arrowhead gone? That guy freaked me out. The lemur said, getting a smile from Izuku. He was just overly excited, he gets like that. Izuku said with the lemur nodding. Yeah, that much was obvious. So can I come with you guys? This place is kinda of running out of food for me, he requested with Izuku smirking. I don't see why not. Izuku said before tilting his head. You got a name? He asked with the lemur shaking his head. Well, let's get you one. He said as he glanced at the lemur while trying to come up with a name. Well, whatever it is must be something truly magnificent, worthy of a being such as myself. One that will strike terror into the hearts of my enemies, awe from my allies, and one that will The lemur said, only to scream hide behind Izuku as a large noise came from behind him. What was that? He demanded, only to see some fallen derby. As the lemur was cursing slightly under his breath, Izuku smirked as he came up with the perfect name. Usopp. Izuku declared as he picked up the lemur. You will be Usopp. Izuku declared with the lemur tilting his head. The hell's an Usopp? He demanded with Izuku smirking while trying to hold back his laughter at what he was going to say next. Usopp is the name of the bravest and strongest warrior from his part of the world. Captain of an entire fleet of ships, he leads an army of over 8,000 men and giants. He is the greatest marksman in the world who never misses a shot. He defeated the king of the giants and became their king. He's a living legend. A man made a god. Izuku said, trying desperately to hold back his laughter as the lemur's eyes lit up. Amazing. Truly a name worthy of me. From this point on I shall be Usopp. The lemur declared with Izuku laughing. Well then let's go introduce you to Appa. Izuku said with Usopp questioning just what an Appa was, leaving the two water tribe siblings alone. So looks like we got a new member to the crew. Sokka said looking completely lost. Sokka. Katara said suddenly, causing the teen to jump. Do you think when all this is over and we go back to the South Pole that if we search hard enough we could dash? Sokka didn't let Katara continue as he brought her into a hug. Stop it, Katara, please don't give yourself some vain hope. I would do almost anything to see Mom again, but please don't let that consume you. Sokka pleaded as the water bender started to shake. I just miss her so much. Katara said as tears started to spill. I do too, Katara, I do too. Sokka whispered softly into her ear as he tired to soothe his sister. Line break. Izuku was waiting for them as the three natives to this world made their way back to Appa. Aang had calmed down significantly and seemed to have a newfound determination around him. Though his eyes did light up when he saw Usopp on Izuku's shoulder, with said lemur quickly ducking behind Izuku to hide. The siblings were more calm, but they still had an air around them as they silently climbed onto Appa's saddle. Seeing that Aang wasn't in the mood, Izuku took Appa's reins and with a quick yip yip. The bison was in the air. As Sokka and Katara were lost in thought and Izuku's focus was on the sky ahead, Aang's eyes were staring unblinking at the temple that was growing smaller and smaller. And the young avatar didn't look away once until the clouds fully covered the temple. It was gone from sight. Line break. Zuko sat alone in his quarters meditating while practicing his breathing. He didn't even look when Iroh walked in holding something. I'm guessing you have news on the avatar. Zuko spoke calmly. There is news. Iroh confirmed. However, I don't think you'll like it. So don't get too upset, the old man said with Zuko sighing. Uncle, you taught me that keeping a level head is key to being a good leader. Whatever you have to say, I'm sure I can handle it. Zuko said with Iroh letting a sigh. Might as well get it over with. Alright, we have no idea where the avatar is. Instantly the candles that were on Zuko's desk burst, forcing Iroh to step back. What? Zuko demanded as he stood and faced his uncle, who brought out his fan. You really should open a window in here. He suggested, only for to grab the object from Iroh. Let me see the map. He demanded as he scanned it. There have been multiple sightings of the avatar, but he is impossible to track down. That was easy to see as Zuko scanned a map to see the locations that avatar was traveling to be sporadic and random. Just how was he supposed the avatar when he was clearly a MSTR of evasion? Line break. Admitted Aang, we're lost. Izuku sighed as he said this while looking up from the map and to Aang, who was smiling sheepishly. Well, I know it's near water. Aang said with Izuku snorting. Terrific, my worries are gone. Izuku muttered as he leaned back against Appa's saddle as he closed his eyes to take a nap. Now I know why Zoro took so many. He thought as Usopp dropped himself over his shoulder. Try not to shake so much when we're napping, wide load. The lemur muttered. Believe me, I would if it didn't throw the others off, rodent. Was the reply from the bison. Aang meanwhile was glancing towards Katara, who was busy sewing up Sola's pants. Grinning, he took out some marbles. Hey Katara, check this out. He said before using air bending to rotate them through the air in a circle. In a moment, Aang, she said, causing Aang to pout. Stop bugging her, arrowhead. Sokka said with a lazy grin and wave. Girls need space when they do their sewing. He said, only for Izuku to snort. Don't go down that road, Sokka, nothing good comes from it. He warned with Katara nodding. He's right, what does me being a girl have to do with sewing? Katara demanded with Sokka snorting. Come on Katara, what else am I going to think? We've been living our whole lives in a place where men do the fighting and hunting, and I haven't exactly seen any great female warriors since we left. Sokka said with Katara scowling as she didn't have any evidence to correct him. Oh, so you just need proof that girls can be just as good as men when it comes to fighting and hunting. Izuku asked with Sokka nodding. Show me the proof and I'll admit I'm wrong. Sokka said with Izuku sitting up before a filmless TRP appeared in his hands. And that is? Sokka asked with raised eyebrow while Izuku grinned. Your proof. Izuku said it, and while Sokka looked unsure, one glance at Katara's grin that was daring him to say no took the film into hand. And that's when images started to flash through his eyes. Memories of great and powerful woman. Boa Hancock, Nico Robin, Nami, Big Mom, Jewelry Bonnie, Bello Betty, Stussy, Yuta, Tsuru. All incredibly powerful and capable women who were stronger than any man he knew. He also saw Izuku's brief memories of female heroes such as Midnight, Ryukyu, Mirko, not as impressive but still very capable. Once the memories had finished, Sokka blinked and leaned back. Wow! He muttered with Izuku grinning. Well. Izuku pushed with Sokka sighing and nodding. Alright, I was wrong. He admitted with Katara grinning. What did you show him? She asked with Izuku shrugging. He wanted to see powerful women, so I showed him powerful women. Izuku said with Katara spotting a little bit closer to him. Thank you for that. She said before throwing Sokka's pants at her brother. Finished your pants by the way. She said getting a thank you as he put them on. Aang saw Katara getting closer to Izuku and frowned but grinned. Don't put those pants just yet, Sokka. You won't be needing them where we're going. Aang promised with the other three frowning as they made their descent. Aang, we just stopped yesterday. We need to get some more flying in before we make camp. Sokka informed, getting a nod from Katara. He's right, Aang, at this rate we won't get to the North Pole until spring. Katara said, more than a little annoyed. But Appa's tired already. Aang grinned as he peered down at Bison. Aren't you, buddy? He asked. I wonder if we can find only more of that yummy kind of flour here. Appa muttered while Aang, not understanding Appa, grinned. See, he's exhausted. Aang laughed with Izuku, who could understand Appa, rolled his eyes. Sure he is. The green-haired team muttered with Usopp scoffing from where he sat on Appa's tail. What else were you expecting, boss? The bald one's an idiot and the Bison's thought process is slower than he flies. I say we ditch them and find another way to wherever it is we're going. Usopp suggested, only to get flung screeching into the air by Appa wagging his tail. Finally some peace and quiet. I'll enjoy it while it lasts. Appa groaned with Usopp screeching as landed back on the saddle. That was nice. Appa grunted. Soon the four were on the ground and Aang was grinning as he pointed towards the sea where giant fish were surfacing. That's why we're here, the elephant koi. He explained as he strpped down to his undergarments. I'm gonna ride it. You guys gotta see this. He laughed as he turned around to his friends only to see them scowling in annoyance. Something wrong? He asked, only irritating them further. Really, Aang, there's a war going on and you want to waste time playing here? Katara demanded with Aang grinning sheepishly. Ah. Watch this. He asked as he jumped into the water and quickly swam up to the koi, waving as he rode the fish. Unbelievable. Katara muttered under her breath before turning to Izuku, who had his arms crossed and his eyes were darting around. We're being surrounded. 5 of them. Izuku warned, causing the water tribe members to tense. Relax for now, they don't seem hostile at the moment, merely observing. Izuku said before looking towards the ocean. Might as well get our dinner for the next days. He muttered as with a wave of his hand a large cyclone of water erupted from the ocean and an elephant koi went flying in the air. Leaping high into the air, Izuku caught it before storing away to use later. As he descended back down to the ground, he felt the shock and panic coming from the ones that were observing them. Let's see how they handle this. He thought with a grin. In the woods, the 5 spectators were having a hushed conversation. How did he do that? One of them asked with another shrugging. No idea, but judging by the way the other two are dressed and that water bending, it's clear they're not Fire Nation. Though how he jumped high into the air and where that koi went I have no idea. The third said with the fourth figure snorting, well it looks like the Unagi will deal with one of them for us. They grinned as they saw a large shadow quickly approaching the koi the bald kid was riding. They weren't the only one who noticed as Izuku was instantly running in the water and towards Aang. However, as he was doing so his body was getting larger, and more gray, his arms and legs changing, and before everyone's eyes Izuku became something else entirely. This was the animal form of the turtle fruit, model, Isabu, and after curling himself into a ball he bulldozed straight into the sea monster right as it began to surface, launching it back. Shell spear. Izuku thought before swimming back to the mainland where his friends were waiting for him. Thanks Izuku, you really saved him. Aang said with Izuku nodding as he retuned to normal. Walking past the three he stopped in the middle of the clearing. Alright, show's over. Now come on out. Izuku demanded with Izuku feeling hesitation before 5 teenage girls emerged from the trees. Each one had makeup on and wore green robes with armor. The one in the lead kept a strong face but she couldn't help from shaking. I am Suki, leader on this unit of the Kyoshi warriors, and I welcome you to Kyoshi Island. Suki said with everyone's eyes lighting up at the familiar name. Now what business do you have on our island? The girl demanded while the ones behind her hissing at her not to upset the guy who can turn into a giant turtle monster. This idiot wanted to ride the koi. Katara muttered flatly, causing Aang to pout before grinning. Is this island really named after the avatar Kyoshi? Aang asked with Suki nodding. Indeed it is. She said with Aang's grinning widening, and Katara knew exactly where this was going. What a coincidence, because we're traveling with the avatar. Katara interrupted with the girl's eyes widening. You lie. Suki accused with Katara shaking her head. No, I'm not. Allow me to introduce you to the avatar. Katara said, and Aang grinned and got ready to step forward only for Katara to gesture to his left. Meet Avatar Izuku. The waterbender introduced with Izuku raising an eyebrow, Sokka looking confused and Aang looking devastated. Sokka was the one to snap out of his stupor first. That's right. How else do you think he can pull off all those amazing feats? Sokka said and quickly elbowed Aang in the chest when he was opening his mouth. Go one big guy, show them what you go do. The water tribe warrior invited with Izuku sighing. Good grief. He muttered. Izuku then held out his hand before the Fire Nation symbol formed out of fire. Next to it the wind morphed into the symbol for the air nomads, while the symbols for the water tribe and earth kingdom formed out of the sea and ground respectfully. The warriors were in awe before quickly bowing. It is an honor to finally have you back, Lord Avatar. Suki said before bowing deeper. And deepest apologies for the insult earlier. She said with Izuku just shrugging. Don't worry about it. He dismissed. We won't be long here anyway, we just came for a pit stop to resupply. Izuku said. A lie, but one that can easily be made into a truth. Our village isn't far from here, we can show you to the market. In fact, our trading ship usually is due to arrive in just a couple of days. If you can wait, they should have everything you need. Suki explained with Izuku considering it. Well guys, what do you think? He asked the group. I'm not against it, we are running low on supplies and it would save us the trouble of stopping again so soon. Katara reasoned with Sokka nodding. Plus it would prevent the risk of Fire Nation soldiers from spotting us. He added with Izuku turning towards the airbender. Aang. He asked with the airbender huffing and turning away, his arms crossed. Don't ask me, oh great avatar. I'm sure you don't need my input. He said, only to get a smack to the head from Katara. So sorry about him. She said before leveling a glare towards the airbender, telling him to shut his mouth. Well, looks like we'll gladly accept your kind offer. Izuku said with a bow. There's no need for that, Lord Avatar, please allow us to show you to our village. Suki said as they began their walk. However, soon after they started, the warriors began to whisper something to Suki, and after getting a nod they rushed off in opposite directions. Sorry about that, but they felt the need to spread the word the Avatar has arrived on our island. She informed, getting nods from Izuku, Katara and Sokka, while Aang continued to grumble. So Suki, are all the warriors female? Katara asked, getting a nod from Suki. Indeed, we handle any threats that come to the island. I heard at one point they also tried to do all the hunting too. But between training, defending the island and their own lives it became too much. So we left hunting to the men and women who aren't part of the warriors. She explained. Katara was grinning as she looked pointedly at Sokka, who rolled his eyes. Yeah, I get it. I already said I was wrong, didn't I? He asked, getting a laugh from Katara, a confused look from Suki. Water tribe. First time either of them has been away from home. Izuku explained, with Suki nodding in understanding. Before long they had made it to the entrance of the village, where a large group was waiting for them. Upon seeing them they instantly started to cheer. Welcome, Lord Avatar. The chef said as he approached the group. Thank you for having us. I promise once we resupply in couple of days we'll get out of your hair. Izuku promised. Please think nothing of it. Come, I'll show you where you'll all be staying. He said as he led the group through the town that was still glancing at them as they pointing and talked excitedly. A couple of minutes later they were in front of a large inn with a barn. Your air bison can stay here, young air bender. The chef as Aang grinned and Appa groaned in happiness. Have fun sleeping outside, wide load. Usopp cackled with Appa yawning. Anywhere is peaceful as long as you're not their rodent. The bison said back before laying down to take a nap. Soon the gang was situated in the best room the inn had, with a large spread of food. Alright, Aang. Katara sighed, with Izuku activating the com fruit so no one could overhear their conversation. You can start complaining now. Katara offered, and Aang wasted no time. How could you lie to them like that? Izuku isn't the Avatar, I am. Aang shouted, with Katara sighing. Yes, we know, but we needed a way to get them on our side quick. Katara said back. And we couldn't just tell them I was the Avatar because... Aang asked back. Oh, I'm sorry, I must have missed it when you could bend more than air. Katara snarked. Look, Aang, at the moment you can only bend air while Izuku can bend them all. It made sense to tell them it was him. Katara explained, with Sokka rubbing his chin. It did make sense to tell them. He said with a smile. What are you thinking, Sokka? Izuku asked, with Sokka grinning. Okay, hear me out. We know Aang will have to reveal himself to the world at some point, right? He asked, getting nods. Well, why don't we just wait until he's ready? Why don't we just have Izuku act as the Avatar until Aang's got a few more elements under his belt? It's not like he's gonna do anything to abuse the title. What? Aang said, completely against the idea. But that's a terrible idea. He tired to argue, with Katara raising an eyebrow, and why is it so bad? Like Sokka said, Izuku wouldn't do anything to shame the title, and he's got the strength and abilities needed to pull it off. She said before narrowing her eyes. Besides, I thought you didn't want to be the Avatar anyway. The water bender said, recalling what Aang claimed when they first meet him. Well, yeah, but... Aang tried to say, couldn't come up with a good excuse, so he just sat in the corner and sulked. Well, with that settled, Izuku, I've got a favor to ask you. Sokka said as Izuku took down the soundproof barrier. What is it, Sokka? Izuku questioned, with the water tribe warrior taking a deep breath. Please train me. Whatever Izuku was expected, it certainly wasn't that. You said with a little experience and training I could be a great warrior. I can get the experience when we're traveling, but for training I need a teacher. Please, Izuku, you're the strongest guy I know. I don't even think my dad and the other warriors could beat you if they fought as a group. Sokka asked, with Izuku glancing at Sokka. I'm not going to pull any punches, you're going to go throw hell. Izuku warned, with Sokka nodded. That's exactly what I want. If I'm going to be a warrior, I'll do what I need to. Sokka promised with Izuku smirking. We'll start at dawn tomorrow. I need the night to prepare. Izuku said while taking a bit of food. Sokka meanwhile grinned. Thanks Izuku, I won't let you down. He promised before sitting down and stuffing his face. What about you Katara? You want me to train you as well? He asked with Katara tilting her head before shaking it. Maybe another time Izuku. Katara said with the green-haired teen turning to Aang. You want to train Aang? He asked getting a scoff. On what how to be a better avatar? Thanks but I'll pass. He muttered with Izuku sighing as he took another helping of food. Suit yourself. Line break. What the avatars on Kyoshi? Zuko demanded having heard from the cook who nodded. Man I heard it from said it came from the mouth of one of the residents of Kyoshi. A child, but the description was perfect. The cook informed as he set down the fish he had prepared. Taking the fish he headed for the door. Change course at once. I want to be at Kyoshi Island within a day. He ordered with Iroh sighing as he saw his nephew first. He could at least give us a chance to eat dinner first. Line break. You ready to do this Sokka? Izuku asked as they headed deep in the woods at the crack of dawn. You bet I am. The Water Tribe warrior said despite still yawning. So what's first? He asked with Izuku smirking. Muscle training. We're going to build up your strength. That way you're better suited both for combat and more advanced training. Izuku explained when they entered a clearing where two large boulders were waiting. What you want me to carry one of them? Sokka asked a little incredulous with Izuku shaking his head. I want you to punch it 1,000 times with each hand and then kick it 1,000 times with each leg. I'll heal any crippling injuries you get. Izuku explained Sokka still looking unsure. Look this is meant for two things. One to build up your strength and the second was to toughen up your body until eventually you can do something like this. Izuku explained before punching the boulder shattering it to pieces. Sokka had stars in his eyes and immediately ran towards the other boulder to throw a punch. Crack yo! Sokka cried as he held his hand while Izuku sighed and used the water in the air along with the heal fruit to heal his hand. Now let's try this again. Start hitting the boulder nice and slow. Izuku instructed and Sokka nodded and with a determined expression threw a punch. The Water Tribe member winced but kept on punching until he was at about 50 with his left fist. It was then that Izuku picked up an acorn and launched it at the Water Tribe member nailing him in the back of the head. Ow! He shouted turning and glaring at Izuku as he rubbed the back of his head. What was that for? He demanded to Izuku who hummed. That was an arrow that just killed you. Izuku informed surprising Sokka. Do you think that the enemy soldiers are just going to come at you one at a time? No, they use any advantage they have. Numbers, range, bending. You'll have to be ready to face all of this and more if you want to make a difference in this war and get out of it alive. Izuku explained. Even when you do fight someone one-on-one you should always expect them to play dirty. Kicks to the groin, being blinded, them using a concealed weapon. Never assume the Emery doesn't have a hidden weapon or is beaten until they are on the ground. They could also use mind games or your own beliefs and values against you. You'll either need to shut them out or use it to your advantage. Sokka just stared at the teen in front of him who at most was only 1 year older than himself. But the amount of experience both of us have is immeasurable. Sokka thought as he clenched before facing the boulder. But that won't stop me, I'll do whatever it takes to get stronger and protect my friends. He thought before he started to punch the boulder again. And this is how the two spent their next several hours. Sokka continuing his punching of the boulder with Izuku keeping a close eye on him. Izuku would occasionally laugh acorns at the Water Tribe teen, making sure not to launch them at the same intervals of time. Whenever Sokka's fist got to damaged Izuku would once again heal it, enough so it wouldn't get % damage or infected but not enough that it wouldn't toughen up the bones and skin when it healed. Sokka had just hit the 800s when he completely dropped in exhaustion drenched in sweat. And I think that's our cue to take a break. Izuku said jumping down from the tree he had been resting on. Rest up. I'll go get us some lunch. We can eat and you can get back to training after you rested some. Izuku said before heading out of the clearing. Oh, and Suki, please make sure he doesn't start training again until I get back. Izuku said before leaving with a surprised and confused looking Suki coming out of the woods. Okay, how does he do that? Suki asked, having never heard anything about Kyoshi being able to sense people. No idea, but I'm gonna get him to teach me it. Sokka said, still breathing heavy. So you were watching us? He asked with Suki shrugging. For about 20 minutes. Training and patrol had finished for the day and a few people your sister said you and the Avatar were training here. She explained before glancing at Sokka's hands. Seem like it's pretty rough. It's gotta be. Sokka said. I'm basically starting at zero and if I want to fight besides my friends I gotta get stronger fast. Sokka explained before rubbing the back of his head. Mind if I ask you something? He asked, getting a nod from Suki. Where are the older Kyoshi warriors? I've seen your team but you seem to be the oldest. Sokka questioned with Suki smiling as she sat down. They're off fighting in the war. Suki explained. See, one of Kyoshi's biggest regrets during her life was not doing anything to stop an earth-bending warlord named Chin. He was conquering the entire kingdom and Kyoshi did nothing to stop it. It was only when Kyoshi's home was threatened and even did she just separated it from the mainlands and moved out to sea. That's how the Kyoshi Islands were formed. Suki said with sadness in her voice. What happened to Chin? Did Kyoshi eventually come back and stop him? Sokka asked with Suki shaking her head no. Chin was too stubborn to move when the island was separated and fell to his death. Suki admitted. It wasn't until she was nearing the end of her life and she reflected on her choices that she regretted not doing anything to stop him sooner. That's what she wrote in her journal at least. The warriors of Kyoshi didn't want to repeat history. So once a warrior hits 17 then she leaves the island to venture out and start helping where she can. Here Suki wore a determined smirk. And soon it'll be my turn. I'll head to the mainland and help end the war any way I can. She declared with Sokka smiling. That's amazing, but Izuku might end the war before he even have a chance, you know. Sokka challenged with Suki grinning. Well then I guess I'll have to convince him to take me with you guys, she said with Sokka laughing. Well, you've got my vote. He said with the two of them shared a laugh. Line break. Everything hurts. Sokka was no longer laughing. It was the next morning and they were once again heading to the clearing. He had woken up that morning with his whole body screaming in pain, which Izuku merciless ignored and dragged him along the trail. He had managed to get through both sets of punches but only got to the 200 for the kicks on his first leg before his body gave out. Relax Sokka, we're leaving today, remember. Once we get our supplies we'll be flying through the air for the next few days. Plenty of time for you to rest. Izuku explained with Sokka nodding as he reluctantly started walking on his own. Well then what are we going to do? Sokka asked with Izuku grinning. You are going to hit me. Izuku said with Sokka looking confused. You heard me, Sokka. If you can hit me the exercise ends. If you can't we continue until the supply ship gets here. Izuku challenged. Now then, to make this fair I'm giving myself restrictions. I won't use my powers, I won't fight back, I won't look into the future and I won't use my hands. All I'm allowed to do is use my legs to dodge. Sokka nodded as they entered the clearing where Suki's team of Kyoshi warriors were waiting. Hope you didn't mind I invited them to watch. Izuku said with Sokka looking at him questionably before shaking his head. Doesn't matter. He said before getting a fighting stance. What an amateur. One of the Kyoshi warriors giggled. This got an eye twitch from Sokka but ignored it and his aching body and charged the best he could and tried to throw a punch at Izuku, who easily dodged. This got laughs from the warriors. Nice swing, but maybe next time you should try hitting something. Another warrior giggled. Growling and now sweating heavily, Sokka charged and ran towards Izuku and tried to throw another punch only for Izuku to take a step back at the last second. Sokka tried to take another swing only for Izuku to pivot away. Turning, he rushed towards Izuku, this time going for a kick only for Izuku to duck and forcing Sokka crash into a tree. Want some help there, Sokka? Suki laughed, with Sokka getting angrier and angrier as he chased after Izuku and took swing after swing only for all of them to end in failure. The laughter from the warriors were getting louder and louder, and Sokka was now shaking as his rage kept on growing and growing until finally he snapped. Would you all just shut up? I can barely move and your heckling isn't helping. Sokka shouted and turned to Izuku, who had his arms crossed and was looking very disappointed. So is that what you're going to do when you're faced with an Emery who likes to run their mouth? Scream at them to stop talking while your judgment gets more and more clouded until you finally snap? Izuku questioned before shaking his head, with Sokka snarling, I wouldn't be like this if you hadn't invited them here to distract me and dash. They could also use mind games or your own beliefs and values against you. Sokka's eyes widened as he dropped to the ground. Remember this, Sokka, a warrior could be the physically strongest force in the world, but if their mind is weak they're no more dangerous than a wild animal. Izuku said, with Sokka closing his eyes and taking a deep breath as the second part of Izuku's advice rang through his head. You'll either need to shut them out or use them to your advantage. I can't shut them out yet, but maybe I can use them. He thought before slowly opening his eyes as he stood up and faced the warriors. Today my training won't end until I either touch him or the supply ship comes, but my body is weak from training yesterday. He said before bowing. Please, can you help land a hit? Sokka asked, and after several seconds he felt a light pat on his back, and when he looked up he saw Suki's smiling face. Happy to help, she said as the other warriors were quick to surround Izuku. Humming, Izuku glanced around before looking at Sokka. Just remember, Sokka, you need to land the hit. Doesn't count if they others do. He reminded the teen, who nodded. Show the avatar what you got, warriors. Suki ordered as the warriors charged. Izuku grinned before jumping back to avoid being grabbed before twirling away just as another two warriors took swipes at him with their fans. The warriors tried a pincer attack only for Izuku to somersault in the air and on top of the boulder before jumping down to avoid more fans. Suki meanwhile was coaching Sokka. Watch his moves and look for an opening. She told Sokka, who was nodding as his eyes were glued to Izuku waiting for the moment to strike. The warriors had Izuku enclosed in a circle. Izuku glanced around before smirking. Well, come on warriors, show me what you've got. He said as the warriors charged, moving in tandem and coordinated as a unit. And they were making progress as every few attempts were getting closer and closer to grabbing him. It was to the point where he was dodging by mere inches. Finally they reached a point where they jumped him and left only one possible exit, but it was during his escape that Sokka flung himself in front of the opening and forcing Izuku to slam into him. Sokka latched on Izuku and grinned. I gotcha, buddy, he said, laughing even though he was still breathy heavy. Izuku just laughed. You sure did, pal, he praised as Sokka's grin got wider. You sure did. Line break. The gang was now on the docks waiting for the supply ship. Okay, I gotta admit, coming here was a pretty good idea, Katara said, having made some good friends in the short time they had been here. Maybe, Aang muttered, having spent most of his time either riding the koi or trying and failing to get Katara's attention. Still, it feels like we're missing something, Sokka muttered, with Izuku sighing and pointing. You mean that, Sokka? He asked, where a familiar Fire Nation ship was approaching the island. Great, what does he want? Sokka groaned, with Izuku grunting. Let's not find out, he muttered before flying through the air. Prince Zuko, a soldier said, trying to get his attention. What is it, can't you? I'm dash. He started to yell only to see Izuku rapidly approaching the boat. Having a very good idea about what was about to happen, he turned to everyone on deck. Everyone inside. He ordered, with Izuku picking up the ship a moment later, and after giving it a good spin once more sent it flying into the distance. A cheering crowd awaited Izuku when he got back. It gets funnier every time. Sokka laughed before grinning. So how many times are you going to do it? He asked, with Izuku shrugging. As many times as it takes for them to take the hint. He said before grinning and pointing towards the horizon. And it looks like the supply ship is right on time. Before long the gang had bought their supplies and were about to head out. Thank you again, Lord Avatar, for saving our island. The elder bowed, followed by the rest of the townsfolk. Izuku just smiled. I was just doing my job, sir, nothing more. He said, getting grateful looks from the townspeople. I wish you all safe travels. The elder said, getting nods from the, oh, tell Suki I said bye and I hope to see her in the world one day. Sokka called. How about you tell me yourself? Suki's voice shouted as she came charging through the village before leaping up into the air and landing on Appa. Suki. Sokka cried as Suki laughed. Now dressed much simpler clothes with a travel bag over her shoulder. What you said the other day was right. About the war being over before I could even leave, so I talked with my team and then asked Midoriya if I could come along. Suki explained, with Izuku shrugging once they tuned to him. Figured it'd be a nice surprise, and were any of you going to say no? Izuku asked, with the other three grinning. Welcome to the team. Katara laughed as she hugged the girl, who hugged back. Have a safe journey, Suki. The elder said, with Suki nodding. I will, elder. She promised before looking towards the rest of the villagers. Goodbye, everyone. She called as the villagers all wished her goodbye. And with a yip yip, Appa took to the skies, with Suki's eyes locked on her home until it disappeared over the horizon. Now then, where to first, Lord Avatar? She asked before blinking as Izuku scratched the back of his neck and the other three laughed nervously. Suki. Sokka smiled nervously. We've got something to tell you. A warrior's worth. Come on please, I promise it'll be fun. I swear to God I'm going to throw you off this bison if you keep asking. Suki could only watch in disbelief at the argument in front of her. She had been brought in on the secret and had no problems with it. Keeping the Avatar hidden in plain sight while someone stronger acts as a decoy was a sound plan and one she's happy to help with. The problem, however, is that the actual Avatar wanted to take a detour, something that's apparently a common occurrence. Aang, I don't know if you forgot this, but there is a war going on. We can't just keep making these pointless stops on whim. Sokka lectured, sitting across from Aang on Appa's saddle while Izuku was currently flying Appa with Momo on his shoulders. Katara saw Aang start to pout and sighed annoyed, but decided to try to play peacemaker anyway. Aang, you said you wanted to visit the city of Omaha, right? At his nod, Katara continued. Well, why do you want to go there that badly? She asked, thinking it could be something like the Southern Air Temple and might hold some importance to the young Avatar. Aang was only too happy to prove her wrong, however. Okay, check it out. He grinned as he held his hands up high. They've got these awesome DLVRY channels that you can slide down so fast that you dash. Aang said, motioning going down before Katara held up her hand to stop him before turning to Izuku's back. Izuku, I believe you were about to throw him off Appa. As the group continued to try and explain to Aang exactly why using DLVRY systems as slides were not a good use of their time, Izuku only smirked in amusement. Only to go ramrod straight as his haki activated. Everyone noticed the change and were more than a little thrown off by it. Izuku. You okay? Katara asked and only grew more worried when Izuku didn't answer her. Sokka. Izuku called, his voice low and arctic cold. Take the reins. It wasn't a request but an order. One that had Sokka gulping and quickly rushing to comply. Ah, you good buddy. Need a quick trip to the boys' room? Sokka asked with a weak chuckle as he took Appa's reins into his hands. Izuku didn't answer, just gently taking Usopp off his shoulder and placing him on the Water Tribe boy's shoulders before suddenly disappearing. The group gasped, but before they could fully comprehend what just happened, a loud bang rang through the area, followed by two more. What the heck? Aang yelled, peering over the edge to try and get a better look, only to JRK back as a large blast of fire erupted from the forest below. What's going on down there? Sokka shouted as he tried to swerve out of the now constant streams of fire. Just throwing it out there that Omashu dash. Shut up, Aang. The other three interrupted the airbender. Katara was looking over the side, desperately trying to find any glimpse of Izuku when something came flying toward them. They couldn't make it out at first, and it was only when Sokka caught it that they realized what it was, with Aang, Katara and Sokka letting out screams as Sokka tossed it onto the saddle away from him. It was a head, a severed head with a terrified look on his face. Aang was vomiting over the side of the saddle as Sokka and Katara shakily stared the head as Suki gently picked it up and examined it. Suki, what are you dash? Katara asked, only for Suki to shush her as she stared as the tattoo won the side of his head. Two triangles with their bases facing each other, a vertical line running down the middle of them with a bull's skull in the middle. Sokka, get us down there. She ordered quietly as the Water Tribe siblings stared at each other, unsure of what to do. This indecision was appreciated by Suki, who turned to glare. I said get us down there now. She shouted with such ferocity and anger that it shocked out of their trance, with Sokka trying to find a safe place to land. Hurry it up. Suki said with a harsher tone than they had heard from her yet as she tried to make sense of what was happening below. I'm trying. The Water Tribe warrior shouted as desperately searched. Luckily it was only a few more seconds before he found what he was looking for. A small area devoid of trees that would be perfect for a safe but swift landing. Come on Appa, hurry up. Suki shouted at the bison. The sounds of fighting as well as horrified screams were more clear than ever. Yeah buddy, we gotta stop that psychopath. Aang yelled at his bison, his eyes filled with rage as the closer they got to the ground the more he could make out large splats of crimson as well as bodies littering the forest floor. The moment they landed, Suki was already leaping off Appa with nothing but a hunting knife in her hands, just as 7 men dressed as a mix between Earth and Fire Nation emerged from the forest. All begging for help from a green-haired demon. Come on guys, we gotta help Suki and stop Izuku before dash. Aang's words died in his throat as he and the Water Tribe siblings' eyes watched in horror as Suki slammed into the lead Fire Nation man, her knife piercing his skull, killing him instantly. The group of men were stunned at the swift action, allowing Suki to grab the dead man's sword and slice the next closest in half. Kicking the upper half to the third man, this one wielding a bow and arrows, snapping the man out of it enough to knock the bisected man away. However, this allowed Suki the time to get in close and slice off both his arms, causing the bow and the quiver of arrows to fall, which she swiftly caught before finishing the man off. The 4 had snapped out of it at the point and were quick to attack, with 2 benders among them being a fire and earth bender. Rushing towards them now, Suki tossed the sword and drew the bow and arrow, beef sliding under a boulder latched at her before drawing and firing an arrow directly into the chest of the fire bender, killing him seconds before he could launch a burst of flames. The other 2 non-benders held no weapons but were large and muscular enough to make do without them. The first went for a punch to the warrior's head, but she dodged and leaved a kick directly at the man's nose, cracking it and sending flowing from the now ruined appendage. The man hollowed in pain and clutched his nose, allowing Suki to take another arrow and ram it into the bottom of his jaw with so much force the arrowhead emerged from the top of the man's head. The earthbender was red with rage right now and fired a colossal wave of earth that Suki barely managed to avoid. The other man, however, wasn't so lucky and was quickly buried alive. Suki paid him no mind though and was quick to fire off a few more arrows, but the earthbender was easily able to defend himself. However, Suki was more than prepared and with a quick burst of speed and one more barrage of arrows got the opening she needed to draw the borrowed blade and slice the man's head off. The head didn't even hit the ground before Suki raced off into the forest, the sound of fighting growing even louder as she did so, leaving the remaining 3 confused and terrified. What was that? Katara questioned, still trying to process what she just saw. Not sure. Sokka muttered, sounding like he was in a daze. Aang meanwhile was shaking with grief at the massacre he just saw. How could she do such a thing? Hey, what about Dash? A monstrous roar emerged from the forest filled with rage and a promised revenge. Boss. Usopp muttered concerned as he flew off, concerned with the others following behind him. As the trio raced through the woods, they passed by multiple dead bodies, each having been killed in horrible ways. Stabbing, bleeding out, burnt to death, impaled, crushed, some were even missing parts of their bodies. What they all had in common was a look of horror and agony on their faces. Why? Katara muttered under her breath as they ran towards the sound of fighting still going on. Why would Izuku and Suki do this? She asked, not believing their two most experienced and mentally stable friends would just go on a killing spree for no reason. I don't know. Sokka muttered as he looked around before grimacing at the continuous carnage around them. Suki started acting strange the moment she saw the symbol on the side of that guy's head, and it was like something snapped in Izuku. But there has to be an explanation for this. They wouldn't just go on a rampage. Katara argued, knowing that there had to be more than this. Something Aang disagreed with. They're monsters with no regard for human life. That's all the explanation I need. The Avatar huffed, appalled that anyone could defend this. Says the Avatar who ran away when he was expected to take his role seriously. Katara shot back bitterly, getting a hurt look from Aang. But that's not fair. You don't know the full story. He accused. You said you never wanted to be the Avatar, so you ran away. That's all the explanation I need. Katara responded, throwing Aang's previous words in his face. If he can't be bothered getting their side on this, why should I be bothered getting his on that? Katara thought, having enough to worry about without Aang's duck bullshit right now. Aang had no time to respond to this as Sokka interrupted with an incoming. This forced Katara and Sokka onto the ground and Aang into a tree as three bodies came soaring overhead and slamming into the trees behind them. Getting back up, Katara and Sokka were more than a little disrupted by now being covered. We're getting close. Sokka muttered, wiping off as much. Then we can finally stop this. Aang muttered, flying ahead to stop the two psychopaths from causing even more pain. When the Avatar finally reached the source of the fighting, it was a worse sight than he could image. Dozens of bodies butchered and mutilated littered the ground. Some looked like they were trying to flee only to get shot in the back. Some had arrows embedded in them while others had sizable holes in their backs. Monsters. He thought before looking to the center and saw his friends. Suki now held a spear and was wielding it like a MSTR, spinning it around and either knocking weapons out of the enemy's hands or cutting them down directly. Izuku, however, had transformed. He now stood 17 foot tall with now bulging muscles. His skin having turned into green hardened scales with black spikes littered over his body. A long, powerful-looking tall swung behind him with a large club-like appendage growing at the end. With what looks like a helmet covering his head made of the same material as the spikes. This was the dragon fruit, model Ankylosaurus. Izuku grabbed two of the enemy's heads before smashing them together, turning them into paste. Three of the men tried jumping him from behind with their swords raised high, only for them to shatter on Izuku's scale-covered back. The men couldn't even blink before the tail struck all of them, turning them into stains on the ground. A firebender lopping a stream of flames at him, only for Izuku to shoulder tackle them into the tree, destroying him and the tree. That's enough, you demon. An earthbender shouted as he and four other fired barrages of earth at him. Grunting, Izuku leapt into the air to avoid the attacks before aiming his clubbed tail at them. Club cannon. Izuku thought before firing the club off his tail and directly into the group. Upon impact, a furry explosion occurred, engulfing and killing them all. Izuku smirked as he landed. It doesn't make any sense, but I love those dino powers. He thought. His smirk disappeared, however, when he found Aang's staff pointed in his face. You're done, you monster, I won't let this continue. He shouted, determined to stop this needless. Izuku just looked bored as he stared down at Avatar. Do you have the slightest idea what's going on here? Izuku asked, getting a growl from Aang. Yeah, you wanted to go on to the killing spree. What else could there possibly be? He stated, getting a sigh of annoyance from Izuku before glancing behind Aang. What do you want to do about them? He asked as Aang looked over to see a large group of men charging at them with weapons drawn. Aang's glare became determined. You're going to apologize and beg for their forgiveness and do everything they want to make up for the crimes you just committed, got it? Aang ordered, getting a hum from Izuku before took a glance back at the group who were clearly weren't in the mood to hear it. How about we do this instead? Izuku said, raising his hand and giving it a slight jerk to the right. In an instant the entire of group had been reduced to ribbons and a pile of gore. This was the power of the cleave fruit. Aang's mouth dropped in horror and guilt that he couldn't stop their deaths, but before he could begin yelling at Izuku, the green-haired boy pushed past him. You done, Suki? He asked, returning to his human form, getting a nod from Suki just as the Water Tribe's siblings entered the clearing. The pair grew even paler at the sight but managed to move on as they rushed over to Izuku and Saki, who were both covered in blood. Before they could even say anything, Suki rushed over to them, a frantic look on her face. Sokka! Katara! She shouted, seeing them covered in. Are you two okay? Who did this to you? She demanded, checking them over. Katara was a little thrown off but managed a small smile at seeing the concern. She explained, getting a sigh of relief from Suki and a guilty look from Izuku. Sorry about that. He muttered before waving his hand and using the power of the blood fruit to clean the blood of all of them. The Water Tribe siblings, while happy that their friends seemed to have calmed down, were still worried. Izuku. Suki. What was the cause of this? Why did you suddenly kill all of these men? Katara had to ask. Aang opened his mouth, but a quick but dark look from Katara shut him up. Suki blinked before hitting her head and muttering, "Why didn't I think about it?" under her breath before letting out a breath and looking at the two with sympathy. We'll explain everything, Katara, but I just need to check a few things before that. She told them before turning to Izuku, who seemed to know what she wanted as he nodded. They're safe. He promised before a hatch opened eye on his chest, allowing them to peer inside. What they saw shocked Aang, Katara and Sokka to the core. It was a large group of people, mostly young children and women. They were dirty, malnourished and looked incredibly scared while wearing scraps of cloth. Suki smiled in relief before scowling. And the piece of SHT, Izuku gave a whistle, causing 3 clay golems to emerge from the other side of the woods. 2 of them were dragging a man by the arms while the third was holding a sword. As for the man being dragged, he was incredibly well dressed in robes made of slick as rings flittered his fingers. However, what stood out to the gang was that his face was bleeding and covered in bruises, and around his neck was a necklace with the same engraving on it as the tattoo of the man's head they examined earlier. The 2 golems slammed him hard against a tree while the third tied him up. Suki said nothing, but the look on her face was pure disgust as she marched up to the man, stabbed him deep with her knife, causing him to gasp. Hurts, doesn't? She said without a hint of merit as she dug the knife in deeper. But you know you deserve it, don't you? This and so much more, you're rotten, worthless, insignificant piece of dash. Suki. Katara shouted, finally snapping the Kyoshi warrior out of her daze. Just what is going on? She demanded, wanting answers and tired of not getting any. Suki gave Aang, Katara and Sokka a look filled with pity and sighed before deciding to just come out with it. They're slavers. This brought the 3's worlds to a screech halt as they proceed what was just revealed. What? Sokka croaked out. Slavers. Suki repeated with such revulsion they thought she might be sick by just saying the word. Those who make a living by treating human life like cattle and selling it off like property. She spat. This particular organization calls themselves the Headhunters. A few years ago a group of them came to our island with the hopes of making a large profit. Suki's hands were clenched. We managed to drive them off but not without them killing a few of us. She stated before her entire body began to shake, while making off with a few others. She revealed her entire body brimming with hate. How do you know they're headhunters? Aang asked weakly, and Suki breathed in deeply through her nose. The symbol. She explained, gesturing to it. After the attack, we sent out word to our sisters across the world. Soon raids were being conducted on any hideouts they could find, with them freeing as many slaves as they could. Our sisters were never among them. She recalled bitterly while ignoring the looks she was getting from her fiends. They also started gathering information on any other groups that could and sent them back to us to prepare us for any more sneak attack. Part of that information was the symbol each of them used to identify themselves from others in the same profession. Suki finished her explanation. But how is something like this possible? Katara couldn't wrap her mind around it. How could people do this to others without a second thought and get away with it? The waterbender demanded. There's some. Izuku answered simply as he approached their captive. They'll do anything if it means getting what they want. As for how they keep getting away with it, well, it's a pretty safe bet it's thanks to someone who's high up in the Earth Kingdom. I can't image this going over well with someone not pulling the strings in the background. Izuku told them. Wait, how'd you even know about this, Izuku? Sokka asked, remembering Izuku acting strange. Yeah, you went stiff and started acting weird. A few seconds later you were starting your rampage. Katara added, getting a sigh from Izuku. It's thanks to my haki. I had it dialed up completely and could feel the negative emotions. Along with my enhanced hearing, I was able to hear phrases like, "You're nothing but property now," and "Make sure you smile pretty for your owner." Here Izuku turned to the sickened-looking group. Pretty easy to figure out from there. Izuku then turned his full attention to their captive, who only glared at him in response. If you're looking for information, then go ahead and kill me. I won't talk no matter what you do to me, he declared. I highly doubt that. Izuku challenged, getting a growl from the man. But luckily for you, I'm short on time, he said before extending his hand right into the man's head. The man screamed in fear before Izuku using the memo fruit to extract his recent memories. However, he didn't just grab the information on where the captives came from, but also any information on where their current hideout was, as well as information on soldiers, weapons, other captives, and anything else that might prove useful. Storing it away for later, Izuku gave a final glare towards the man and then without a word twitched his finger, and the leader's head was flying through the air. Let's go, he ordered, already making his way over to Appa, while Usopp, who had been watching from a safe distance, landed on his shoulder. You okay, boss? He asked. You seem extra angry today, he noticed, getting a grunt from Izuku. I'll be fine, I promise. As for my anger. Izuku trailed off as images of Jinny, Kuma, Fisher Tiger, the Boa sisters and countless other slaves flashed through his mind, as well as the cruel monsters who thought they could own a life. Let's just say this isn't something I would wish on my worst enemy, and leave it at that. Katara, Sokka and Suki were quick to follow him, but Aang looked around. Wait, what about all of them? He asked, gesturing to the dead bodies all around him. Leave them. Least these sacks of SHT can do is feed some animals that come across them. Suki answered without slowing down in the slightest. Aang wanted to argue, but it was clear his friends didn't feel the same way, and even a large part of him agreed that the slavers didn't deserve any proper burial. So with one last conflicted look around, he chased after his team. Line break. It didn't take long for the group to find the village, or what was left of it. The homes were destroyed, the surrounding forest chopped and logged, with there being scorch marks here and there. All the remaining citizens, which couldn't be more than a few dozen and were mostly elders, were covered in dirt and little more than sticks and bones. Still, they came out when they heard the one guard they had left. An elderly former soldier announced someone was coming. Greetings and welcome to our home, the village elder muttered with a tone that was once filled with pride but now was more than a dull and tired note. He and the rest of the town had clearly given up and were simply waiting for the end. I apologize, but if you're travelers, there's very little for you here. We barely have enough here to sustain ourselves. He apologized, having looked the youths over and thought they were simply wandering through. Izuku just smirked. No need to apologize. It's clear that you're going through hard times. He muttered, looking around and feeling his anger rise even more before managing to calm down. In fact, we're here to help you. Izuku revealed, and before the elder could ask what he was talking about, a hatch opened up on his chest and a voice from inside shouted, "Grandpa." The elder sat there in disbelief as he felt little hands wrap around him in joy. "Grandpa?" The voice asked again, confused, and slowly the elder looked down, shaking and hoping against hope that this was real and not just some cruel trick, before his eyes caught sight of a young boy looking at him in confusion. "Lee?" he asked, his voice tinged with hope. The young boy just smiled happily and hugged his grandfather. "It's me, Grandpa." He laughed, causing the elder to break down in tears and embrace his grandson. "Lee!" he shouted, his voice filled with happiness and joy. All round them celebrations and reunions were being held. "This is wonderful." Katara muttered happily that some good came out this whole nightmare. Izuku just chuckled. "Oh, we're just getting started," he muttered as his body began to glow orange. Tick tick tick. The gang looked around, confused by the sudden noise, but it was quickly driven from their minds as Izuku walked to the center of the town and placed his hand on the ground. "Rewind," he muttered. Before the eyes of both the villagers and the gang, the village seemed to repair itself. Buildings putting themselves back to normal, stables being rebuilt by invisible hands. What was once a mountain of splintered wood was now a strong and sturdy wall surrounding the now rebuilt city. Most of the villagers had dropped to their knees in sheer awe at the miracle in front of them, and even the gang was having a hard time believing it. "Izuku, that was dash," Katara started, and to notice Izuku was panting heavily. "Izuku?" she asked, going to help only for Izuku to wave her away. "Just give me a moment. That technique takes a lot out of me," he muttered before using the Sunday through Sunday fruit to restore his stamina more quickly. Once he was back to full, his friends approached him. "Izuku, that was incredible. How'd you do that?" Sokka asked. "Rewind. An ability from the time fruit. Lets me restore any non-living thing to a state it was in before. Though if part of it is missing, it won't fully restore, and it takes more energy to restore the longer it's been and the worse state it's in," Izuku explained before heading to the now destroyed gate. "Now on to the next problem," he muttered as he stared at the wasteland in front of him before once more bending down and placing a finger into the ground. "Now great forest emergence," Izuku thought, and a second later the ground started to tremble. It was then that the villagers beheld their third miracle for the day, as a new forest filled with lush trees, flowers, and grass quickly covered replaced the ground. However, the important thing was that the villagers could see fresh fruit and vegetables growing, all looking ripe and ready to eat. Dusting off his hands, Izuku got back to his feet. "Alright, one last thing before we go," Izuku muttered before a wave of clay erupted from him. The clay morphed and glopped until it formed into 50 clay golems, which he quickly was quick to arm with weapons and devil fruits. There were 2 golems that were the most important, however. One golem had 2 devil fruits, those being the heal fruit, which allows the user to heal any wound or injury through the use of a liquid that comes from the user's body. The other is the glare fruit, which not only lets the user see in every direction for 4,000 kilometers in all directions, but the real benefit were the tear whales. True, they could be used for an attack, but when combined with the heal fruit, became subversive fast-acting healing baths. The other golem that was important had the plague fruit, the superior version of the sick fruit. With this, the golem will be able to get rid of any diseases or illness the villagers might have. As the rest of the golems spread out either to gather food or prepare defenses, Izuku faced Suki. "Want to help me with the raid?" he asked, getting a nod from Suki. "Always," she said, wanting to put down more slavers if she could. Izuku then turned the gang, but before he could speak, Sokka stepped forward. "I'm going with you," he declared, a determined look in his eyes. "Sokka." Katara muttered in surprise as her brother turned to face her. "I'm more useful with them in the raid than I am here, where I'll probably just get in the way here," Sokka told his sister, who nodded. "Just don't die, you idiot," Katara asked, getting a smile and hug from her brother. "Wouldn't dream of it," he promised before releasing her and joining Izuku and Suki. "Ready?" Izuku asked, getting a nod from the two. "Well then, let's head out," he ordered, turning to leave for the base of the headhunters, knowing from the memories he got it wasn't that far. "Wait." The sudden shout gave them all pause before they turned and saw the village elder on his knees with tears running down his face. "Are you really?" He struggled to get out the words, though it looked like everyone had the same look of disbelief on their faces. "Are you really going to go attack the headhunters?" he asked, getting a nod from Izuku. "Yup. We've got people to save and monsters to kill," Izuku told them as hope began to shine in the eyes of the villagers. Aang did frown at the mention of killing, but even he knew better than to say anything at the moment. "But why?" the village elder asked what they were all thinking. He had barely said anything to the young man, and in less than 5 minutes bought life and hope back. Now here he was saying he was going to go save the rest of their families and put in an end to the monsters that had been tormenting them. Izuku just gave them a kind smile. "Because you were in trouble and needed to be saved," was all he gave as an answer before he, Suki and Sokka headed off, leaving the stunned villagers behind. "Just who is that man?" the elder muttered in complete disbelief, getting a chuckle from Katara which drew his attention. "Who is he?" she repeated before gesturing to her friends retreating back. "Isn't it obvious?" she asked, getting a shake of the head from the villagers. Aang realized what she was about to say, but Katara was too quick. "He's the Avatar." Line break. It was almost sundown by the time the trio reached the headhunters' base, an old military compound absconded about a decade ago, surrounded by 4 guard towers. "Okay, so what's the plan?" Sokka asked, knowing Izuku's been scouting out the compound close to 30 minutes now, thinking up the best strategy. "We wait until the sun has set. Plenty of time to get comfy and complacent as well as a little drunk." Izuku smirked before continuing as he drew a small map of the base on the ground. "From there we split into 2 groups. You two as well as some clay golems will be the ones to head to the actual prison cells where the captives are being kept and free them. From there head to the armory and take as many weapons as you can carry. I'm sure the captives will be more than happy to assist with the golems getting whatever's left. From there make your way out to this building," he said, pointing to a small square near the back. "That's where they're holding all the food and medical supplies. This time the golems will carry everything using the scroll fruit to transport it safely back to the village," Izuku explained, getting nods from the two. "And you?" Suki asked, getting a smirk in return. "It seems that the top brass here are a bit on edge, probably because the team we stopped earlier today didn't show up. So they, along with what I'm guessing to be their best armed guards, are held up in the central building. I'll be clearing them out and finding any information we can send out," Izuku explained, getting nods from the two. "All right, judging by the sun we've got about an hour before the operation begins. Do whatever it is you need to prepare," he instructed, getting a nod from the two, who walked off to get into position. Once they were gone, Izuku sighed. "They're gone now, you can come out," he instructed, seemingly to no one while getting no response in return. Well, it was worth a shot, Izuku thought, knowing someone was hiding in the trees a few meters away. Whoever this was, it was someone new and strong, evident by the fact that they were rapidly killing the headhunters that were patrolling the area was any indication. Hell, the only reason he picked them up was because their voices disappeared from his hockey. "I don't know why you're here, and frankly I don't care. Just don't get in the way and there won't be any issues," he warned before heading off to join his friends. With the briefest sound of a rustling branch reached his ears. An hour later and the gang was set to begin, an army of clay golems behind them ready to go. Well, it certainly seems like they're having fun. Suki muttered darkly as she heard the sounds of celebration going on. Well, it won't be for long. Izuku muttered, his haki still picking up the stranger's energy at the side of the hideout, clearly waiting for them to make a move first. You both ready? He asked, getting nods from the two. Perfect. Now leave clearing the yard to me. He muttered as he and one of the golems used the warp fruit to teleport up to one of the 4 guard towers and instantly taking the guards out. They then disabled the alarm bell before warping over to the other 2 and quickly repeating the process. When it was done, Izuku glared in disgust at the men below, eating and drinking without a care for the suffering they've caused. Enjoy hell, you pieces of SHT, he muttered before extending his hand. Room. With that, a large transparent sphere covered the yard, and with a snap of his fingers the hunters were surrounded by the golems already armed and ready to kill. It was over in seconds, and before the hunters even had a chance to scream. The golems were soon picking up and storing away weapons as well as food and drinks that hadn't been cooked or severed yet. Izuku went and opened the gate, allowing his friends in, and although Sokka grimaced slightly, he still kept his focus. Remember the plan? He asked, getting confirmations from both in return. Well then, good hunting to the both of you. He told them before heading off to the central building. Getting in was no problem, with the door being left ajar as was taking out the first 3 guards. However, once he entered the first core door where there were 6 guards, Izuku had to give them credit, they were quick to react and instantly charged at him. Though that's all Izuku would give them, as his finger sparked with lightning that instantly bounced from one guard's heads to the next until all 6 had been electrocuted. God, I love chain lightning. Izuku smirked as he used one of his favorite attacks from the rumble fruit. However, all the noise quickly drew the attention of all nearby guards, and soon over a dozen soldiers were between him and the stairway to the next level. Well boys, don't suppose you're going to let me through? Izuku asked, and all the hunters did was growl and lift their weapons, getting a smirk from Izuku, who was about to attack when his haki activated. And a few seconds later the wall collapsed and bathed the hunters in a sea of blue fire. Izuku stood there as he watched the hunters burn to death. At the beginning of his time at UA he would have probably rushed to help them, but after the war he's long since been willing to let those that needed to die simply die. When the flames cleared, all that was standing was a figure a bit smaller than he was. They were simple fabric along with some chainmail to cover their arms, legs and torso. They also wore a black cloak and mask that resembled a blue dragon with 2 shamshirs on their back. Blue Dragon entered the quarter with grace but also an air of caution. Gotta admit, not what I was expecting, but I can't say I'm disappointed either. He told them before jerking his thumb to the stairs. So since it looks like we're heading to the same place, want to go together? He asked before loud shouting and banging could be heard. Sounds like they're planning a party. Blue Dragon said nothing but headed for the stairs. However, when they turned, Izuku got a glimpse of their cloak, and under their weapons he could make out a golden phoenix emblem, leaving Izuku with a raised eyebrow as he silently followed behind. Line break, Sokka and Suki's job was a lot more quiet. Thanks to the golems, they had already secured the keys and quite a few weapons while already taking out of some of the guards. However, when they reached the cells their rage grew. The captives were all trapped in their cells, like rage nearly overflowing with bodies, so much so they couldn't even move. Most looked malnourished, and all of them were covered in their own and each other's waste. Inhumane BSTRDS. Sokka thought while clenching his fist before turning to Suki, only to find she was already gone. He quickly spotted her running across the top beam of the room, followed by a few of the golems before landing softly on top of the cages. She was quiet while doing it, though the iron bars still rattled slightly so. This caused many of the prisoners who heard to look up in shock and confusion, wondering just what they were seeing. Suki was quick to SSH them before holding up the set of keys to their shackles and the prison cell while the golems were holding weapons. Dozens of eyes widened in disbelief before watering with tears of joy and hope, though they tired to remain silent as to not alert the guards. For many, though their eyes burned with a renewed vigor and hatred along with desires for revenge, chief among them was an older man with a bald head and several scars littering his body. Luckily the guards were too drunk to properly watch the captives, allowing Suki to quickly sneak down and unlock the cage. Within 3 minutes each and every one of the prisoners were unshackled and free, having been healed with the same combination of the heal fruit and glare fruit. My deepest thanks, my young friends. My name is Ruji and I am, or rather was, the chief of a village that's relative close to here. Ruji introduced himself. Really? Actually, I think we were just there. Sokka said before describing how it looked before Izuku worked his magic. That's it exactly. The chief exclaimed before leaning forward. Tell me, is the village elder and his grandson all right? Please tell me, is my family okay? He requested urgently, startling the two slightly. You mean Lee, right? Suki asked with a raised eyebrow, getting a frantic nod from the man. They're both fine. We had to save Lee from another squad of these worthless lumps of flesh, but he's with your father and the rest of the village. You saved my boy? He asked quietly, getting a nod from Suki as Sokka pointed at her. Yup, she and a friend of ours saved them and wiped out the hunters. The Water Tribe's man revealed before crossing his arms. But that's an average day when you're traveling with the Avatar. Sokka spoke causally but knew it would have a massive effect. And true enough, the collective group started whispering to each other while others simply dropped to their knees. The Avatar is here. A young girl no older than 19 asked quietly, getting a nod from Suki as an explosion and screaming could be heard in the distance. That was probably him. She grinned before her face turned serious. Now then, we've got a couple more objectives after we free everyone else. We're going to raid the armory and supply building to help you guys in your village. Suki explained. Or what's left of it. A young man explained bitterly, and Suki exchanged looks with Sokka, but both held back their smiles, figuring to leave the state of their village as pleasant surprise. In any case, it would be wonderful if you could help us out. I know you all want nothing more than to get out, and I won't stop you from leaving, but... Suki wasn't able to continue as Ruji held up his hand. Oh, don't you worry about that, little missy. We're more than ready for a fight. He stated, getting growls of agreement from the others. In fact, he went on as he already saw some of the younger men heading towards the guard's room with weapons in hand. It would be a genuine pleasure. Line break, you're pretty DMN good with those things, you know. Izuku stated as he watched his current partner slice through hunter after hunter with their shamshears, while Izuku took care of any stragglers that might have slipped through. Blue Dragon said nothing as they continued to slice and rip apart hunters before jumping back. A large man emerged from one of the rooms with a hammer. They dodged the first strike and then the second before going in for an attack, only for the man to easy block it. Jumping back, BD seethed their blades before launching blue fireball after blue fireball towards with the man struggling to dodge until when slammed into him. The man was forced back with a grunt as BD raced forward and delivered a kick that had fire added to it to increase the power. The kick landed and the impact actually sent the man crashing through the wall and down onto the ground below. Unfortunately for him, they had been on the 6th floor, causing him to snap his neck on impact. With him out of the way, thought there was only one door left, and Izuku could feel multiple life signs behind it. You ready? He asked, getting a nod from Blue Dragon before both burst through the door. What is the meaning dash? The best dressed man there shouted, only for BD to engulf him in blue fire, and didn't stop until he was nothing more than a charred husk. His associates naturally didn't like this, but with a few cleaves from Izuku and they were soon stains on the floor. This left the two to search the entire room for any useful information, and it appeared they had hit the mother lode. Agents, locations, plans and routes, as well as names of large Earth nation cities such as Omashu and more troubling Ba Sing SAE. Izuku looked back to DB, who looked like they were frantically trying to figure out what to take and what to memorize. Hey, don't worry about it. I've got thing. Izuku promised before summoning a scroll with the scroll fruit. Within seconds everything was sealed and he handed the scroll to BD. Just place your hand over whatever it is you want to take out. Izuku explained as BD slowly pocketed the scroll, giving a nod before running and smashing through a window. Izuku rushed forward just in time to see them flying through the air using their fire as thrusters, causing the green-haired teen to snort. Show off. Line break. Arm yourselves, my friends. This nightmare will soon be over. Ruji's voice boomed over the voice roars and cries of his fellow villagers as they were picking up every weapon they could in the armory. The riot was in full swing and Sokka's body was filled with adrenaline. Already the prisoners had been freed from their cells and had been treated the best they could thanks to the golems, and even though the rest of the guards had been alerted to their presence by now, the captives had both the numbers and built-up rage. All of this along with the walking shields that were the golems to take nearly every blow, and it had been a complete slaughter. Which had led them here waiting for the captives to finish loading up before heading into the supply shed. Ruji was also splitting up the force they now had, which numbered around 70, into two groups. One of them would head to the storage building and raid it while the other would hold the yard. Sokka had opted to go on the raid while Suki de-iced to defend the yard, and now all that was left was to wait for it to begin. However, there was another reason Sokka was feeling such excitement. I'm finally doing it. He thought giddily despite having some cuts and bleeding a bit. I'm finally making a difference. He thought as he clutched the broadsword he had swiped from the armory. This was one of the reasons he had left his home. Finally, after years of just playing soldier and telling himself that he's making a difference, now he actually can help people and prove to himself and his dad that he isn't just all talk. A small giggle was heard behind him. I know that look. The look of a rookie who's about to do something incredibly stupid. Suki told him as she walked up and sat behind him. Sokka scratched the back of his head as he laughed, both nervously and embarrassed. Is that right? He squeaked, getting another giggle from Suki. Sure is, I've seen it plenty of times of the face of new recruits. And here she trailed off as she looked away, now wearing an embarrassed look herself. Might have had the same look on when I first started. She mumbled, but Sokka still heard her. Really, you? He questioned in disbelief. Yes, me. Suki grinned. It doesn't matter who it is. Me, Izuku, your dad, we all started all zero and worked our way up. Here she took his hand in hers. This is your starting line. Just make sure you don't trip and fall. She requested, with both of them sprouting blushes by now. Don't worry. Sokka said comfortably before his grin became cheeky. Idiots never die, you know. He told her, getting a laugh from Suki. And then it was time. The two armies were ready, and with one last nod to each other, Sokka followed behind Ruji and the rest of the squad that were heading for the storage buildings. A few guards got in their way but were quickly mowed down, mostly by Ruji, who was now wielding a massive pickaxe, and whoever he didn't get was quickly scraped up by the others. It seemed the storage building were the hunters' last stand, as close to 20 of them were huddled in there. Long gone were the sneers and looks of greed and content used to look down on their captives, but now held a look of terrified desperation and would do anything if it meant staying alive. However, they didn't even get the chance to open their mouth as the group burst in and quickly began to tear them apart. Many of them didn't get a chance to open their mouths, and the few that did were only able to let out a terrified cry before they were killed. Sokka himself was actually the last one to enter and had managed to block a strike that would have gotten one of his group killed. Fortunately, he heard this and quickly spun around and ended the hunter. Less than a minute later, Ruji was barking orders and ordering his men to haul out supplies. When the golems offered to store it away for them, Ruji allowed some of it to be stored but wanted to make sure his men actually carried their weight. Something completely unnecessary in Sokka's opinion, but something welcomed by the villagers. If the chief is acting like a hard but again, it means things are starting to get back to normal. One of the young men laughed as he hauled some supplies out the door. There was an air in the room. An air of freedom, of hope, of happiness, and it filled Sokka with a new kind of joy. I can make a difference, he thought. Shink, the sound of a blade being drawn rang through his ears, and Sokka looked around trying to find the source. No one else seemed to have heard it over the noise of taking and celebrating. For a moment Sokka thought he might have just imaged it, but then he saw out of the corner of his eyes the cause. It was a hunter, having been hiding in the shadows until the perfect opportune moment. And now here he was rushing towards Ruji's back with his knife out ready to kill the chief. He tried to call out and warn him, but the noise was too loud. Without thinking he started to race forward, and his hand shaking on his sword as he raced forward. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? He thought, desperately, running as fast as he can to cross the room while ignoring the confused looks he was getting. The hunter was getting closer and no one still hadn't noticed him. Come on Sokka, be a warrior. You can do it. It's the reason he left your home in the first place. He thought as he drew his blade. Splurch. The world came to a complete stop for Sokka. His stare blank and disconnected as he stared at the sword in his hands perking and sticking through the chest of the hunter. The hunter tried weakly to do anything to save his life, but his strength was leaving him fast, as was the life from his eyes. With his last bit of strength he raised his knife to try and stab Sokka, but his body on autopilot dropped the sword and backed out of his reach. The commotion drew everyone's attention, and after a brief moment of silence as they put together what happened, they started cheering as well as thanking the Water Tribe warrior for saving their chief and sending another one of the BSTRDS to the afterlife. Ruji was the only one not celebrating, as he was the only one who could see the boy shaking as well as look on his face. DMN it. He thought with a clenched fist as he cursed himself. Alright, that's enough now. Get your buttes out with that supplies, it's time we leave this hellhole. He barked, getting nods from his people. Once they were gone, the chief gently placed his hands on the younger man's shoulder and began to lead him out. The two walked in silence until Ruji broke it. Sokka. He called, and after a few seconds Sokka looked at him. Thank you for what you did back there. You saved my life. Ruji told him from the bottom of his heart, and while Sokka nodded to him he just kept walking as if in a daze towards the exit, leaving the older man to sigh and follow in silence. Back outside, Suki and Izuku had joined up and were now watching as the now freed captives leave with the supplies, accompanied by the golems with light orbs created by the glint fruit to illuminate the path. They were just waiting on Sokka and Ruji now, and both broke into grins when they saw Sokka start to approach. Hey Sokka. So how was? Suki's voice died when she saw the state he was in. Sokka. Izuku questioned, but the boy ignored him and continued his walk. The sound of approaching footsteps were made, and Izuku saw who could only be Ruji approach them. The older man simply started at the two teens in front of him before shaking his head. He's a brave warrior, and a noble one too. He told them. And if it weren't for him I'd be dead. He revealed before beginning his walk home. The two teens stood in silence for several seconds before Suki turned to the gates and began walking. Come on, let's get out of here. She muttered as she began to walk back with Izuku following behind her, both their minds a million miles away. Line break. It was a massive celebration Katara found herself in that night, as the villagers didn't waste a second to begin their second chance. Dancing, eating, drinking. It was like new life was brought into the village as they celebrated just being alive. Already over a dozen people had come up to thank her for saving them and their village. Despite the fact I didn't do anything. She thought a little guilty. She knew they meant well, and with almost no water bending skills under her belt yet she would have been more of a hindrance at the prison than a help, but still it only pushed her motivation to learn and MSTR water bending all the more so she can help out when it's needed. Still, for now she was just happy that this village could prose her and that everyone had a second chance. Almost everyone, actually. She reminded herself as her mood was brought down when she noticed a few people walk into their homes, their heads down and some crying. Not everyone gets a happy ending, and not everyone comes home in the end. That was a harsh lesson that she was forced to learn when her mother died. It was a fear that has lived in her heart since the day her father left to fight in the war. And now she was see it here in others when they were forced to deal with the truth that their loved ones were either dead or worse, while the rest of the world moved on like nothing happened at all. And they're not the only ones. Katara thought with sadness in her eyes. She looked over to the watchtower gate. Sokka had isolated himself there ever since they returned, not saying a word or doing a thing. Even when the food was brought out he didn't move a muscle, and from what she could tell he hadn't touched the plate she brought him. She didn't like seeing him like this. So defeated and crushed. I've got to do something, she thought with a determined look and made to go over, but a hand on her shoulder stopped her. Don't do it, Katara. Let him have his space, Suki said as she and Izuku had spotted Katara's look and made to stop her. How can you say that? Can't you see the state he's in? How can you say he wants to be alone right now? Katara demanded, appealed that they think she should just abandon her brother right now. Because the way he's acting is the exact same way I acted when I had my first kill, Izuku told her, shocking her. I was filled with so many emotions and just wanted time to think. But everyone just kept trying to distract me and I was just getting angrier and angrier. It wasn't until my teacher stepped in that I got the time I needed, Izuku explained. People act differently when after their first kill, Suki continued. I just wanted to push ahead. Do anything and everything I could to forget what happened. I didn't want to deal with the issues, and it started to show in my life. I started making mistake after mistake, and it wasn't until I was forced to deal with what I'd done that I was able to move forward, Suki told the waterbender. Give him time, Izuku said as he placed his hand comfortingly. Sokka isn't the type to break from this. He just needs to think and sort out his thoughts, he told her, though she still looked unsure. Are you sure? She questioned, getting a nod before turning to where Sokka was. Sokka, we're leaving early tomorrow morning. Be ready, he told the younger man, who after a few seconds turned his head, gave the briefest of nods before turning away. See what I mean? Just let him think, Izuku told her before he and Suki walked off. Katara glanced at her brother one more time. I know you can grow past this, Sokka, she thought before heading off, leaving the young warrior alone with his thoughts.